Right, this is going to be technically the 200th episode of Somebody Insight, but there's absolutely nothing in store for you because it isn't since, I mean, we'll keep names out of it, but let's say the JDG Hoover of esports redacted an episode so it doesn't even exist anymore. Don't know what some people are thinking, quite frankly. But anyway, we'll get another one done for you. And then when we hit 200, we'll do some fun stuff. Now, what's good is this show is brought to you by a sponsor. No, it's not the one you're thinking of. It's a returning sponsor. It's Liquid IV. Remember the one I was telling you about? It's a like electrolyte drink. But I wanted to actually take you into the abstract for a moment because the concept of like salts, cell salts, this is actually essentially living alchemy, if you don't understand. And a very key term in alchemy is the term vitriol. You might know it, people are vitriolic, like they have like an anger and a fire towards people. But it's actually an acronym if you don't know. It comes from the Latin phrase, Visitia interiora terrae rectificando evenies occultum lapidem, which means, roughly translated, visit the interior of the earth by rectifying and you will find a hidden stone. Now, if you actually want to know about like the cell, which yes, the one thing you all know is it's the powerhouse of the body or whatever, isn't it? Like the mitochondria. So we all know the real stone we're talking about, the magical one, it's salts, isn't it? That's what you need. So this is where it's at in terms of Liquid IV. If you want to balance out your electrolyte and water intake, it's not just about water. It's not just about, you're not a little poppy. You're not just only drinking water. You actually need to balance the two out. Otherwise, too much water can actually wreck you. Another concept, by the way, from alchemy. Anything can be a poison in too much dosage. Now, too little water, obviously you don't have enough for the old cells to be hydrated, do you? So the thing about it is, much like the philosopher's stone of alchemy, if you are tired, Liquid IV will help you to get the hydration you need to get that second wind, because obviously you're going to need the internal source because it can hydrate 2 times faster than normal water. If you are thirsty, it will ensure you don't become all bloated and dehydrated from too much water, because believe it or not, too much plain water can actually dehydrate you. A lot of people don't know that. It gives you the said salts I referred to 3 times the amount of traditional drinks. By the way, Triune, Trinity, very occult concept there. And it can even give you energy because they have a hydration multiplier and they have an energy one as well, which is a little bit more like certain other drinks out there. So it's quite unique. And also the flavors I actually think are very interesting because I've noticed the flavor profiles they've picked are things like tangerine, pineapple, watermelon, because these cover the fact that when you're taking in salts, understandably, it would almost have a saltier, savory flavor. So they balance it out quite well. So use the code LFN for 20% off, magically to make 20% come off of the actual price at liquidiv.com. That's LFN for 20% off at liquidiv.com. You'll never, ever, people at Liquid IV, no one will ever do a more intellectual advert ever for your product in your life.
That's right. A more arcane reading, perhaps. The most, here on SI, we provide the most arcane alchemical ad reads. But it's okay, because that's how you get the Philosopher's Stone through the transformation of your product through our shows leads to gold. Right? There you go. There you go. It all comes together. Yeah, I've been really enjoying it. They also have like an instant kombucha one now, so they're really getting creative.
By the way, I actually unironically use this product and really enjoy it. Like, yeah, because I have like a personal trainer who works me out, and I can tell you what, no joke, if I just have water, the problem is you feel really thirsty because you're tired, and your temptation is drink way too much water. So in theory, you have to just sip the water, but then that doesn't really give you the feeling that you're getting anything back from it. So I actually find instead, I just have the Liquid IV and I just sip it between each like round of the exercises. And I actually do find it sort of keeps me going a bit, mate. Gives me that second wind towards the end.
Yeah, I did a 3-hour-long cardio session with as part of a Muay Thai seminar with a new UFC fighter this last weekend, and I had my water bottle full of Liquid IV. It was great, kept me going the whole time. So
because that's actually a secret, by the way. People who exercise a lot will tell you is don't just have water. They say actually try and get as much salt in as well as you can. So like I said, to give you 3 times more salt than traditional drink. Anyway, there you go. That's the end of the interview / session about Liquid IV in it.
Now,
just a shame there wasn't Team Liquid at the tournament. We could have done something like that, but there you go.
It's okay. As we know, there was plenty of salt, though, Thorin, from the Spanish casters / co-streamers / fans. dedicated to Niski. Now, we don't like that kind of salt. That kind of salt is not the great salt that you get from Liquid IV, but certainly people getting very salty about Mad Lion's performance, inappropriately so, some might say.
By the way, first of all, did I call it or did I call it about how amazing this format would be? Here's why all the last 10 years of League of Legends competitions from Riot in international competition was so silly. You know what people used to say would happen if you made like all these brackets? They would say exactly what they complain about. Hey guys, they'd go, but I don't want to watch boring matchups of the bad teams. Yes, you can just choose not to watch those. Then you get more of the good ones. Like if you love really high level League of Legends like we do, you get to watch essentially like 4 or 5 LPL or LCK finals. Plus you get actual interregional matchups between the top teams. Yes, it wasn't against the EU against any angle, but still you get more matches. So actually you get more of the matches for the casual, you get more of the matches for the top one. First of all, not only has this tournament already succeeded, but secondly, as I said already, when Worlds is done this year, everyone will demand this format. Whether they give you it or not, everyone is going to finish after Worlds, after that shitty little fucking 8-team single elim bracket where we all know there's only 7 games, there are 7 matches, the series rather. Everyone will say this format needs to exist. And then secondly, it does make this show way trickier though, because essentially between last show and this one, there's been
eight
best of 5 series. So like, we're not going to go game by game, spoiler, but yeah, 8 of these. Man, like, it feels hard to even go back to the quarters, doesn't it? In the upper, like, it feels ages ago now.
Well, it's been a fun week. Maybe not for you because the CSGO major is happening at the same time. By the way, can I just complain about esports scheduling for a second?
Oh.
Why is the major scheduled at the exact same time as MSI and they're both ending on the same day? Like, come on, guys. Like, there's only one major this year. Typically, there's only 2. We only have 2 international League of Legends events. Why is the final for MSI on the same day as the final for the major?
And if you notice, allowed to happen? In past years, they not only would hit MSI, they would also get bloody Worlds with the second major. Like, I agree, mate. Like, the stupid thing is to me, especially because actually CSGO and League of Legends have enormous org overlap. I feel like you want to like shift them slightly apart. What you want it to be like, Monty, is what they do in American sports, where like fucking NFL and baseball or whatever, which is the 2 that are always separate. It's NFL and baseball, right? They run over the top of each other. There's 2 sports that are separated intentionally, right?
The NFL runs in like the winter, and so usually baseball runs during the summer. So
yeah, there you go. You intentionally shift them a bit so you can watch both in theory if you're a fan, right? Especially because back in the day there was no like TiVo, you couldn't replay it. If you missed it, you missed it. So you actually had to do that to get the viewership. And as you say, it's mid-seasonal sense, right?
You know, usually we have the majors and MSI or majors and Worlds on at approximately the same time, but we don't usually have both finals on the same day in the same time zone in Europe.
Practice in the same region is very silly too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just so ridiculous. Like this could easily be avoided. These companies are planning months and months and months in advance with a minor amount of coordination, and it's just so absurd that May 21st has both finals, both in Europe, one in Paris, one in London. Very, very small geographic distance.
You know what, Monty?
As far as the world concerned.
Maybe Riot's finally given up, because here's the problem: in a utopia, obviously this would be a nightmare for G2, for Cloud9. Like, oh, but how can we go to both finals? Just worry about the CS:GO one. You know what? I think the League of Legends one's taken care of. You know, you can just watch that one. You don't need to be there. It's all good. It's all good. Right, what do we get into? There's a million things we can talk about.
I mean, there's so much. The
problem is, with that drama topic, by the way, we'll have to see. But I actually feel like that actually might be fodder for a 4 horsemen, because the problem with that is it does tie into a way bigger topic, which I know people like Richard definitely care about, which is in the modern day. Yes, fans can be annoying. We all know that. But the big problem with this is, it's why I made the analogy of the French Revolution, believe it or not. Mate, they don't really, the biggest myth in history is this, that the people just rose up. No, they're always led by someone, by the way, usually themselves a sort of perverted or corrupted elite/intellectual. And then they rabble rouse the crowd. That's called populism, or you're like a demagogue. And you essentially take that mob mentality, that crowd will, and you direct it in the way you want. You essentially give them an enemy, you give them the slogans, and you tell them, march, march, march. And they have the pitchforks. And mate, we'll get into it maybe on 4 horsemen, like I say, but to me, that whole topic, I actually found that quite shocking, mate, because it wasn't just like, here's the thing. I've had fan bases from different places attack me when I've said stuff or whatever, but that is just random crowd and milling in and out and saying what they want. That's fine. That's what social media is for. I really can't handle it, though, when people who are essentially made men in the Riot system, absolutely under the Riot purview, and could tomorrow, like Dom, when he told someone to fucking paint their nails in solo queue, could have their whole core streaming rights taken away, but no, people like Ibai, etc., get to just skate with all their little goonies on their stream because Riot wants the views. So what I've actually learned is, as usual, there's a totally different set of rules for certain people in certain regions, and then other regions seemingly get carte blanche, because that's the sad thing to me. If fans do it, fans do it. Fans aren't pros. We can't punish them. There's no Riot punishment. But if people in the actual ecosystem, come on, mate. Riot set the precedent a long time ago. You're not supposed to be able to say ridiculous stuff. So why are you rabble-rousing? Why are you causing, essentially, people heartache and we're still in the tournament? What? That's just a sad scenario for everyone, mate.
I mean, the whole thing is just so ridiculous, too. It doesn't make any sense that they were attacking the way they were, Niski, who totally didn't deserve any of the heat that he was getting.
For smiling. They didn't even say it because of his play, bro. And also, here's the other angle that's mental to me about this. Brother, Elyoya should kiss the ground Niski walks on. Him and Hylissang are why Elyoya can look like the best. They enable his game to be the carry from the jungle. Elyoya should, look, you might be mad about other things in the game, but... And also, the other thing, I noticed Dom made this point on the show. I had to learn this the hard way myself, because if I was a player, I'd be the asshole like Elyoya. I'd be the one like, fucking hell, where were you guys? Why are you smiling? Like, what the hell is this stuff? What I had to learn is this. You need a balance in every team. You can't have all nice guys. Can't have all jokesters. That doesn't work. By the way, G2 found this the hard way. G2 thought the secret to the super team, Monty, is people who have jokes and have a fun time. So they got inflacked. And they had, they had broken blade. And what do you know? It was way worse. Because what the hell? Now the edge of perks has gone a little bit. Now all of a sudden, you need the balance, bro. You actually need each type in a team, especially a 5-man team. You've got to have at least one person has to be the jokester to actually let the steam off, in my opinion. One person has to be a bit of an arse to drive you forwards. Like, it actually showed a fundamental misunderstanding of competition, in my opinion, the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, it really, trying to say that you know what a player's attitude is or what they're thinking, or they're not a real competitor because of their reaction, is just so ridiculous. And you can, there's no way to know unless you're inside the team. And honestly, like, what about Niski's career screams that he's not a real competitor? He's had to bounce back from being cut from all these different teams. Every time he's gotten better as a player.
Probably the most improved player year on year ever in European League of Legends. I'll just say that. Think where he started, mate, in the obvious days to now. Every year it feels like he gets better. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And like he's gotten the short end of the stick. Remember when he was the one who was kind of dropped from Fnatic and then picked up by Mad Lions? And honestly, if you are an Elyoya fan, what are you even complaining about? Because didn't you guys just win a European title that you weren't supposed to win? Partially because of Niski's performance. Yeah, it was on Gragas, but the team found an angle for it to work. And so now you're getting angry that he may be underperforming at an international event that he wasn't even supposed to go to. Like, you guys should be grateful Elyoya is even at MSI if you're an Elyoya fan. That was not among the likeliest of outcomes that could have occurred. So that's what I don't get about this whole thing, is that, at first people were mad about Mad Lions because I think they were justifiably frustrated that if they took 4th place in G2-1, that they would be going to MSI perhaps kind of undeservedly. But then they won, and we can debate the fact that they were an underdog, that teams should have banned Gragas, that maybe they would have been exposed a little more. But guess what? They took the title, and so here we are. But I don't understand the level of, the word you pointed out earlier, vitriol towards Niski, when his overperformance arguably, and his carry performance arguably, was one of the central factors as to why they're even able to lose in this tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, because obviously, remember, they would have qualified if G2 had beaten them, but without even having to beat Vitality and BDS. As soon as they beat everyone, first of all, there is no more discussion of like they should have beat. Well, that's how the tournament works, you idiot. That's like saying
when beat everybody.
That's like saying because like some boring team wins a tournament, like, well, you should just take the title from giving them. They beat them in the game. That's the way it works. We're not like the UFC. You don't get to just judge. Whoever wins wins. Then secondly, the part that kills me is this, Monty. These are people just looking at score lines on pages. They're not watching the games. Here's why. Am I on the crazy pills? Was Mad Lions not a team right in those games against T1? Did T1 not have to fight like gods in certain team fights to get back into games? Yes, it was a 3-0. Bro, they were in some of those games. The joke is, even though G2 won a game against Gen.G, I actually think the two teams who had the best chances to win their series, bizarrely, were fucking Golden Guardians, who actually was giving it to JDG. I do suspect JDG had played scrims and knew, like, we can come back. They sort of played like that. And then the other one was Mad Lions, who was in that T1 series. Yeah, the low bracket one sucked. That was essentially what people thought should have happened in LEC, obviously, which is, I think, why they're salty. Like, oh, see, G2 should have smashed them. But G2 didn't, did they? G2 actually themselves isn't as good as people make out. So I think the whole thing's so silly to me. I don't, like you say, as soon as Mad Lions didn't just get here on points, what's the level? You can say they're bad in the tournament. Even then, I don't even know if that's legit, mate. Like I say, they were in that series against T1.
So I mean, they were at the start. Yeah, I will say. I mean, by the end, it was pretty grim, right? Like when the 16-minute win comes through.
That's also though a bigger point, though, mate. Like a bigger point is this. Bro, if LS was ever going to absolutely nail it, he has nailed this tournament, because he said before this tournament that the actual thing you had to do was focus on scaling, right? The joke is the Asian teams knew that. Like, I actually really had questions about some of the casters in this tournament, mate, because they were talking like, because you're up in kills and gold, they like essentially, like, they made it sound like you're just about to close the game. It's like, bro, it really did look like Gen.G knew we were easily going to scale against them and win out. T1 looked, and JDG just looked like any moment we want, we can just win a team fight and get back in this game. Like, these teams were almost just like, right, rope-a-dope, almost like, get you out your system, go on. And by the way, the Western teams drafted to try and get those edges and couldn't make enough of them. So actually, the sad thing is, even though, yes, it felt close and it looked epic in the team fights, like, I can't lie, mate, I never ever thought any of these Asian teams were losing. Even the good Golden Guardians one, it's like, bro, if you saw how they were fighting, they were willing to fight the next second right after that. It's like they sort of just knew they were better players, you know. And there's another reason, you know, people don't watch these regions. Because if you think it's miraculous that JDG could, like, fight from behind, like, you don't know JDG. Like, JDG, for real, is like a super team that has worked. And this is the nightmare. Don't ever tell me about draft against JDG, mate. I'm sick of it. Because here's the angle, Monty. How do you draft with 5 bans to ban out Knight, Ruler, and 369? There are 3 players and you have 5 bans. That's without banning, like, OPs. Good luck with it. You can't. So if you ban out Knight and 369, Ruler is on his champion, he's on a Zeri. Oh, Zeri's bullshit. Then ban out the Zeri. What do you know? Knight's got Syndra. Mate, it is literally, you know, we have this saying in basketball, pick your poison. When you had Shaq and Kobe, your choice was, do you want to get destroyed inside or outside? You can pick, but he's going to do it to you either way. You can't match up on all of them, you know?
Well, it's true. And, you know, we did see the constant Syndra bans throughout the LPL playoffs, even though Syndra has kind of been a fringe meta pick just because
he's one-shot people.
I mean, Knight was extraordinary on the Syndra in the 3rd game of the
series.
And
by the way, I'll tell you what, another thing about Asian mid laners is this. I really want Westerners to watch this. Their fucking stopwatch usage is... Oh, mate. It's like Knight on that Syndra when they caught him in mid, fucking Chovy. Oh, mate, they are unbelievable. By the way, unironically, I saw Kevin Kim in League of Legends made this point. What a banger reference. Chovy, while microing himself to the fountain, quickly buying that stopwatch and using it. If you don't know it, go look up from TI. That is the Anna on OG moment where he won an insane fight against PSG LGD just by quickly going back and changing items and then coming back and win the fight like a buyback or something. Like that is like the joke on that one is, you know what the League of Legends menu's like, Monty. It's really hard to do it. He's opening it. Andy was microing and doing the E, like, what? Like that actually unironically deserves like a whole fucking breakdown or something. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you guys missed this moment, it was game 3, which is the one that Gen.G managed to come back from behind. And basically Chovy was playing Rumble. He was the only one alive on his team. And he was fighting a 2v1 by his fountain. And if he dies, then the game is basically over. So, but what happens is he goes back to the fountain on Rumble, buys a stopwatch, uses the stopwatch to buy time, get himself a kill, and then shove Sion Zeus off of out of the base. And that starts a sequence that results in a comeback win for Gen.G and keeps them alive in the series. Otherwise, this is a 3-0. So really awesome moment from
also
Chovy.
Amazing series. That series alone just delivered like a motherfucker. What a great series. That was what we hoped the finals would be in LCK, but they weren't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I mean, we can talk about this at length now. I think what was so interesting about this series is that we've seen this series 3 times now in the last like month, basically month and a half. Because obviously there was the
That's
T1
weird,
victory.
Monty, because everyone told me the problem with CSGO is you don't want to see the same teams play. You
I wanna
do.
keep seeing
You
this
do, you
series
moron. It's
personally.
amazing. Like, I would, by the way, if that ends up being the final again, I'm in. I'm in. I'll have my popcorn. I'll be ready. Come on, Chovy. Like, I'm ready for it, mate.
I think there's some really cool content to be made
Yes.
just of the evolution of this matchup over the last couple of months because of the number of times we've seen it. And it's been interesting every single time we've seen it, even though this is the only 5-gamer that we've had between these two teams, because it's been really back and forth overall. And I think talking about the evolution is super interesting. Because we had a pretty convincing, I would say, victory by T1. It was winnable by Gen.G in the upper bracket.
Oh, for sure.
And then
He's talking about LCK,
back,
obviously. Yes.
LCK, yeah. And then on the bounce back in the finals, we saw the Gen.G win 3-1, where Gen.G looked pretty in control of that series. And then this series could have been very easily a 3-0 for T1, but they did throw a little bit, and Chovy had that extraordinary play that managed to allow them to win game 3. Gen.G convincingly wins game 4, and then we have a really high tension game number 5 that, even though it's a shorter game, really was kind of balancing on the edge until one team fight by T1 ends up just taking the game, and they're able to drive home the win in 26 minutes. But I think what's really interesting about this series is that I said this at the time at the LCK finals, but it really felt like T1 was not prepared specifically for Gen.G in that matchup, and that they were in that series, they were kind of going back to the well, and then they were trying all their old strategies, and they went back to Caitlyn Lux, which Gen.G was very prepared for, and then they were trying Zeus on some of these carry top laners like Jace and Kennen, and that was their primary plan. And then when they started going down 0-2, that's when the Scion comes out, and it feels almost like it's a desperation play, and they weren't really prepared to play with some of the compositions, especially with tank tops that they ended up running towards the end of that series. Now, if you contrast that to this match in particular, they come out with the Scion. They come out with level 1 Scion plays where they're trying to get advantages in the jungle and dive this bot turret and get kills onto Gumayusi and Keria early. And so they have set plays. And this time around, it really feels like they are prepared. They take away the poppy. And I think Gen.G had a misread on the meta coming into this particular game. Like Peanut's insistence on Wukong. I think Wukong is nowhere near as good as a lot of other junglers that are available right now. And granted, T1 was banning Vi and Maokai, which are very core Peanut picks. But to not take up the poppy in that instance, to not go back to potentially the Sejuani, I think is a pretty big mistake from Gen.G. Wukong, through the nerfs that he's received recently, is even more item dependent and therefore more snowbally than he was previously. And he's just not at the strength of some of the other junglers that we're seeing in the meta, particularly with the poppy buffs coming through.
I mean, now there's Peanut, though. That's the problem. I mean, we pointed out he has the limited champion pool, and I have to say, great job pinching it. Like, it actually put him in trouble.
Yeah.
He didn't look that good. He didn't look that good, mate.
But he should be able to play the poppy in some of these games where it wasn't banned. He should be able to play Sejuani, which we know he's good at. He probably at this point in time should be able to play Gragas in the jungle as a flex pick. I mean, these are all things that I would hope that he would be capable of doing. He did get the poppy in the final game of this series, but I think it felt the reverse way this time, where Gen.G was kind of the one staggered and grasping at straws, whereas that was T1 in the finals. So T1, I think, came in with a really great game plan overall. And Thorin being on the Gwen in the top lane. Yes, Gwen is a counter matchup into Scion, but he was oftentimes set behind because of set level, like the set plays in the early game where the Scion would get ahead, or at least they weren't able to punish in the top side. I think there was a misread on even Gen.G's own play style. Some teams can get away with the Aurelion Soul. I don't think Gen.G is one of those teams. Aurelion Soul creates a power vacuum in the mid lane in the early and mid game. Gen.G plays through mid lane pressure. They play through mid lane advantages. There's no point in having Chovy if you're going to sit back and scale.
You're just hamstringing him, right? If you do that.
Well, it's just like it changes the fundamental character of your team and the way that you play the map. Like GenG is a team that wants to get priority in the mid lane, that wants to have first move agency on the map, right? They want to be able to get Chovy out of lane into a side lane to skirmish. They want to be able to push up and then change their lane assignments so that they can manipulate minion waves or they can maximize their farm on the map. If you're playing Aurelion Sol and you're sitting under turret and Faker is playing Annie and is able to get roam on the map and get that agency, you're just going to have a bad time. You're going to have a really bad time. And Gen.G spent a lot of time banning Annie in the finals. Like this is there are a lot of mid lane roaming champions that are available right now, and many mid laners are trying to have the Nautilus, have the Annie, the Lissandra, the Ari, these picks in the mid lane.
Cassandra even potentially.
Yeah, Cassante, so that
Faker looks, by the way,
a lot of push.
What I actually do like about Faker in this era is, despite the casters all still trying to make, he's still so great. It's like he doesn't even try to ego against Chovy and people like that. When he's against people like that, he goes, right, my job is not to smash mid lane. That is not who I am. So he doesn't even attempt it. Like he plays into the coach's plan, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and it's working. And I think that this is a great meta for Faker in particular, and I think it's a great meta for T1. The question marks would have been on Zeus playing tanks effectively in the top side, but that's been working out. Owner had a really good series against Gen.G. His Poppy game was great. His Rumble game was great.
That could be the reason they won.
Yeah, Faker did an excellent job as well in the mid lane. And then, of course, Gumayushi and Keria in the bot lane were the focus of the games. It is about a lot of these hyper carries right now. It is about, getting Gumayushi a bunch of kills on Aphelios and Jinx. And these are Gumayushi champions. These are some of his bread and butter. And the fact that Zeri has moved to a kind of still viable, but not priority pick is amazing for T1 because it's enabling Gumayushi's best champions. Also, some of Keria's best champions. Like you love to see Keria on the Tahm Kench, as weird as it sounds, right? You love to see him on the Thresh. And these are picks that really work well with what T1 is trying to do. In the same way that the meta is empowering JDG in a way, a little bit differently, I think, because Faker and Knight's champion pools are different. And 369 is probably a better tank player in team fighting than Zeus is overall, but Zeus has more dimensionality in terms of potentially being a threat on champions like Jace if it's necessary in the top side. We also see a lot of versatility in the draft from T1. I love the way they drafted on blue side in the final game of this series, because when you take the combination of Gragas, Rumble, and Cassante, you literally have no idea if you're Gen.G for your R5 pick where any of those champions are going. Like it could be Gragas jungle, it could be Rumble mid, it could be Rumble top. It could be Rumble jungle. It could be Gragas jungle, could be Gragas mid. Faker plays there. The only thing is that it's not Cassante in the jungle. That's all you know. So you have to prepare a top lane pick as though it's going to be either Cassante or Gragas in the top side. And what that means is Doran picks Gwen because he thinks it's going to be a Cassante matchup because Gragas, Faker has typically been the Gragas player on this team, but no, it's actually Zeus on the Gragas and it's the Cassante in mid. Faker turns out is a very good Cassante player, even though we haven't seen a lot of it. Had that famous escape sequence within the Raptor pit in that game. Played it really beautifully mechanically. Gets the shove in on the mid lane versus Chovy's Ari, and it really I think throws Gen.G for a loop. But that is some great drafting from the T1 coaches and the T1 team, and it seems like they're very prepared for this tournament. They have the flex picks under control. Multiple of their players can play these flex picks. I'm sure Faker can play Rumble mid too, just like Chovy did if it was required of him. They just look like
they really are team. Like you remember. I always say one of the craziest moments ever, which made me feel like gone through the looking glass, was that G2 MSI semi-final against T1 in season 9, where it was G2 who had all the edges in the draft, and they were the ones with the flexes, and they were the ones that were terrifying you, and you didn't know where. And I remember thinking, like, when is that ever going to happen? T1 is that now. Like they not only is their style unique, but I agree. Like the chess match they've played with the draft is amazing. Like that's what they've taken all the lessons from those last series, and this is why it was a great series, because you had the back and forth heavyweight match. You had chances for Chovy to pop off. You had all these great players having great players. And then at the end, you had the most Monty fucking game 5 ever in history, where it was like nothing. One fight, you win. So you have won the duel. Thank you. Goodbye. And the other thing I'll just say very quickly is this is where this is my specialty is narratives. You need to update your fucking narrative book, guys who are doing the narratives for this tournament. Do not say, wow, they didn't choke. Oh my God, they won a game 5. First of all, they won game 5. Like, do you ever watch the LCK playoffs? You didn't, did you? You missed that one. They don't choke in the fucking normal part of the tournament. It's in the final. This isn't the final. Like, actually, it's entirely on brand. This is when T1 would win. That's why I say, if we can, assuming JDG doesn't just go God mode, let's run it back in the final. Let's see him from the lower bracket into the final. That would be awesome. Yeah. Now, I thought this was just a series that had everything, mate. Had everything.
Yeah, it was really entertaining. T1 did beat KT in game 5 in this playoff run.
Yeah. If they were just chalkers against anyone, they could have lost that.
Beaten KT? No.
It was a very questionable game for sure. It was a kind of, but that game even reminds me of something as well. Another thing about the meta at this tournament, which is why I never ever felt like the Western team could actually win, is when the Western team wins, and even when they get a wipe, Monty, it's like, wow, they're going to get an objective. They're getting gold back here. When the Asian team wipes, it's like, game over. Like, mate, it is crazy how fast you can end in some of these fights once it's like 25, 30 minutes in the game. You can just end, like, if you do the really good fight, a game is over. It's over. It's crazy how fast the Asian teams can end, mate. It's wild for me.
I think
so
it's
exciting.
It's partially, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. It's interesting that you bring it up because part of me likes it because it makes the stakes really high, and also it makes games shorter and not drag out until the end of time, which I do appreciate. Like, if we go back in time and think about the number of 1 hour long League of Legends games that we had, there's something refreshing about seeing a game 5 like we saw between T1 GenG, which is very high tension. And even though it's over in 26 minutes, it doesn't feel like a stomp. It feels like, it felt like a very good and competitive game. I think my problem with it is that a lot of times the way the game works is that if you have a bad wave state or you die in the wrong location on the map, so even with shorter respawn timers like you might have at 25 minutes into this game, if you die by Baron, that means they can just instantly walk to Baron, and then they take Baron before you have a chance to respawn or TP. So in a sense, it feels almost like, I'm not going to say luck, because obviously players know when they're opting into these engagements what the stakes of these engagements are, or they look at the wave state and they say, well, we didn't push out this lane, so if they do win a fight convincingly, like T1 did, where I think they went 4-for-0 in that fight, they can just charge down mid lane and end the game if the minion wave is there, or they have a stacked wave in the mid lane to kind of rally behind and push through to end the game. So I think there are conditions that make certain ends more favorable, but I think that's just is a new way of doing analysis and talking about which fights should be taken and the stakes around each fight. Yes. And I don't really think that conversation has been brought into the game yet, but the more we see games like Game 5, the more it has to be, I think. And I think that's going to be a crucial part of game discussions, and should be a crucial part of game discussions moving forward, when you take into account how easy it is to end from a certain game state and what the risk a team is taking a fight could be in that scenario.
What I'll do is, instead of my usual mode of just flaming the broadcast and even naming them all, because I'm just like that, I'll actually offer an olive branch here, because even in my beloved CSGO, we have the same problem, which is the meta of how the game wins and the flow of a game and who's ahead is so different to what it used to be that even the current casters in CSGO and analysts do not ever talk about what I'm about to mention, which is in CSGO at the moment, if you're watching the major right now, this is a mega lens you can apply. It's actually not about like the pure scoreboard. It's not about who's popping off with kills. It's all about how strong is the economy of the CT side, right? Because the difference between playing rounds where if you win this one, they have to save is enormous for what it does to the scoreboard and your chances of winning. Whereas instead, there are scenarios, because on the CT side, it's so expensive, where if you get a build-up, though, you win a couple of rounds in a row, it's a different game you're playing. Because otherwise, right, think about this analogy. If the CTs are going to be broken a couple of times, that's like 2 free rounds I get added to, like, I win a gun round here and there. If I have to just play 5 straight full gun rounds against full gun round CT, that is like twice as hard almost to win the game. But the casters don't talk that way. They talk like the number of the scoreboard is just, yeah. And I feel the same way about League. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because neither of them are idiots, these groups of people. They've essentially been trained by like 10 years of a different game state, different game dynamic, to think in these ways of segmenting the game. Like in this current world, for example, you get all this action in like early levels and people doing the gank super early. It's not like the old one where you had 10 minutes of farming with like one gank of the head in the jungle. It's not, so the game's different. It's why I keep bringing up for the last 6 months, I'll get the video done eventually, don't worry, boys, about how certain kills and ult usages just aren't worth if you know there's a dragon in 25 seconds. Like if you actually coach them, that would be what you drill into them. Like, don't waste things. So I actually feel like it's just something where the casters have to like analyze the games, figure out why one team's winning, and we have to sort of build that into the arc. Because one thing I try to do when I do my watch parties is that's what I try and keep up to date on. Like, right, guys, the next round is the pivotal round. Like, this is the one where if you break them, you get a few extra rounds. It's not the same as like one on the scoreboard, one on the scoreboard. Because in the same way, like in the modern day league, for example, if you're a casual fan, kills mean almost nothing because of shutdowns, because of objectives. Like, don't ever look, the kill isn't a lead anymore. If you have 6 kills and I have 3, that's irrelevant. What's my comp? Am I scaling? Do I have fucking dragons? It's not what lanes are they on? Is it the fucking support that has the kills? You know what I mean? Like the old methods back in the day of League is so gone right now. It's a different game for me. It's why I actually find it fascinating though, because it feels so different to even 2 years ago.
Yeah, it is. And I think part of it is simply players getting better. Because there's so much, as you're talking about right now, there's so much like basically fishing in the neutral at the moment.
Yes.
So in between objective states, people trying to fish out key ultimates, fish for vision, fish for summoner spells. These are all things. And I think part of the reasons why the games end so quickly is that the best teams are able to get those in the neutral states, are able to get those cooldowns out. And then what happens is when you end up in a team fight, the team fights end up being more one-sided a lot of the time, because if you have the flash off the ADC and you kill the ADC immediately in a meta like this one where there are a lot of hyper carry ADCs, then the game can just end. Like basically your team will be wiped, and you have you still have 3 to 5 people up on your team, and you're able to push through to a victory.
Dude, I'll give you an analogy.
I do think there are factors about that.
Do you remember, because it's the 200th episode, you remember back in the day when we had old Froggen on the show, and he would obviously tell the stories about CLG EU. And if people don't know, what made that awesome, that team, was the year where Koreans already were really good. They weren't quite at their peak, but they were already good enough to beat the Western teams. But the reason, bizarrely, CLG EU was the one Western team that could actually always match up with them is because Froggen even basically told me, he didn't use this analogy, but I'll use it. Essentially, it was like, the joke of like Back to the Future 2, where Biff gets the fucking Gray's Sports Almanac, so he knows all the results, goes back in time, so he can just essentially bet on the teams that win. In the same way, the reason why everyone always says this modern team would destroy all the old teams is because you just know things about the game that no one knew back then. You know concepts that hadn't been crystallized. It was like CLG had done that from like a year or two later, because they famously told me after scrimming the Koreans loads, they realized they were all mechanically really good. Some of them even knew like to take towers rather than just team fight. Like, they knew a lot of concepts, but one concept they didn't have, even Frost, they told me, was they would just blow their ults, but if you forced them to team fight right after, they would just fight. So what CLGEU really realized was, wait a minute, bro. Remember, that's why they would draw the games out. They were like, wait, we just have to wait till there's a time, essentially, that when we engage, they don't back off. They fight, but they don't have like 2 ults. And that sounds now like so obvious, but it wasn't. Like at the time, that is like, holy shit, we're like seeing through the matrix on this one. And that's why they almost stole the fucking OGN,
Right. That's true.
It's baller, isn't it?
Yeah,
we're almost back there again. We've almost gone full circle.
The thing about the game, which is fun about League of Legends, is that the level of play has developed so significantly over the years that basic concepts from that era, like you're talking about, were revelations at the time.
Yes.
And because of things like practice tool, I mean, players mechanically are so much better than they used to be, because you don't have to wait 5 minutes to practice flashes anymore. I mean, if you think about how absurd it was that Riot, and by the way, guys, they did this. They made an argument that a practice tool they weren't going to release it because it would increase toxicity in the game.
You actually use that term.
Think about that. This is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard. So they said that if there was a way to practice on your own, practice mechanically, that then players in solo queue would flame each other. And I made a video that got a lot of views about this back in the day, which is obviously like, if you're going to flame somebody and you're angry, you're going to flame them for whatever reason you can find to flame them. And I said, isn't it better to have positive toxicity, which is you know, screw you, you should go practice in the practice tool, rather than just telling you mom go sky or something like that, right? At least there's an actionable thing that somebody could do as a result of being flamed, rather than just being told horrible stuff on the internet. And so they did eventually release this practice tool, obviously, which we have right now. But the quantum leap in player mechanics that happened as a result of the release of this tool, it really can't be understated, because the only way to practice certain mechanics was to literally go into an empty server and then flash, basically flash and then wait for that cooldown to come up. I imagine certain pro teams would, in their practice room would just set up like 5 PCs all in different empty servers with the same character, just to, practice it maybe once a minute instead, and just walk from PC to PC or whatever. But the whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, imagine that you were trying to tell somebody to play, train somebody to play a game of basketball, but the only way you could practice was a full 5-on-5. That's just such a stupid concept. There would be no way to practice fundamentals. And indeed, there wasn't a way for many years to practice fundamentals within League of Legends. So mechanics got a lot better, and teamwork has obviously gotten significantly better. Understanding of champion interactions and the way team compositions work out, theory behind the game, wave manipulation, all of these things have resulted in the state that we're in. And, I think the game's in a really compelling state at the moment. Honestly, I think it's quite fun to watch.
Yeah, this is good. Time. By the way, just to flip the switch a little bit, we'll talk about some other teams. You won't expect this. This is coming out of nowhere. I actually want to talk about Golden Guardians. Can you believe I just said that out loud? Not Golden Guardians from like season 9 with Froggen still playing. The one now. The one that plays now. Because here's the thing. They did. He was really good, mate. Everyone thinks that I'm going to talk now about late creation. No. The player I actually want to talk out, because in light of what we said about Niski, I want to talk about who he made. This is another player who must be one of the most improved players ever in Western League of Legends. Who remember when he won that first year in CLG, it was like, bro, you were like the bottom of the totem pole when they won. You were the one doing the least. In fact, your job was sometimes do the least, sort of not die, I used to say, be a distraction. And you were playing for mid lane. As a support though, mate, he has come on leaps and bounds year on year on year. And he was going against JDG, mate. And some of the players he was pulling off, like, brother, he was the reason they were in some of these games. I thought he's actually become, remember, he used to also be on, obviously, the 100 Thieves. He has actually had a very legit career. This guy's become actually unexpectedly a second role, one of the better players in the region over the last years.
Yeah, I think he has had kind of ups and downs, obviously, within his career, but especially at MSI, I will say that he is a player that does seem to rise to the occasion in high profile situations when he's competed internationally. Yeah, when he's competed internationally before, like famously when CLG did well at MSI, he was a big part of that success in his weird fringe, pre-rework Aurelion Soul champion pool. And he's always been very good at some of the more niche supports, and especially on engaged supports. And he's shown that off here. I think, hilariously, I think there is a crossover, at least in personality, when it comes to who he and Niski, because so many times in these games, he's just laughing his ass off on the player cams. Like, he seems to really lighten up the atmosphere. And I think if he didn't have that more fun, laid back personality, they probably wouldn't have won that game against Billy. Because if he wasn't able to laugh off that early laning phase where he completely griefed it with Stixay, I don't think they win that game. Like, it's very easy, I think, in that state in game 2. And you can go back and watch him. He is literally laughing on the player cam as they like die at level 1. And I think if he doesn't have that attitude, it would just be so easy to give up and be like, well, I guess we lose 0-2. It was a fun gamble to try and cheese them at level 1, but I guess we lose. No, they win that game. I mean, they figure out a way to win that game. And I think a lot of that is credit to who he's mentality, showing that perhaps when you're smiling, it doesn't mean that you're not a competitor and not trying.
This is the point I want to make. Bro, there's a phrase that guy who did Dilbert, Scott Adams, has. It's a great phrase. He says, sometimes when things happen in mainstream media, there's the same movie playing, but people are seeing a different movie. They're seeing two different movies from the same one, because it's about your perception, your filters. Here's all you need to know. When I say this, surely it just destroys the entire debate about like laughing, being serious, right? At his prime, I've seen Caps do the most horrendous ints and laugh them off, but he's Caps, so that seems swaggy, doesn't it? That seems like he's so sick, he knows he can just come back. But if a player that you think's a loser or played badly does it, you act like he's not taking it seriously. It's like, as you say, like, it's the same fucking scenario. You just, if you like the player and you think he's good, you think it's cool. And if you don't, you just assume he's a loser. Like, it's the same behavior though. And as I think it was Dominic said, it's like, it just means you react differently to things. Like, some people, by the way, might have even learned that as a defense mechanism. Maybe they used to get really bombed out. So instead, I have the phrase I often tell you about esports. If I just went for horseman mode, I couldn't do esports. It would be depression every day of my life to watch the industry I helped build be crumbled away and sold brick by brick to the most evil people in the world. So what you do is you let yourself go into that for a while to make content. And then I always say you flip the switch from tragedy to comedy. It's just a different way of looking at it, and you laugh at it. You let off, because if you don't know, that's even a concept in the occult, by the way, guys. The idea is laughter is a form of banishment. It gets rid of negative energy. Actually, I think it can be useful in the game. My problem would be this. It'd be one, you'd have to be the coach to really know this. If you did just laugh, you played like shit in the game, you played frivolously, and then the coach knew behind the scenes you really didn't give a fuck. Maybe even just tell him, I don't give a fuck, bro. Then you're an arsehole. But until you know that, you can't, you're really just guessing. It's just a question. No, the joke is he did do that. That's why, by the way, if it wasn't, here's the joke, Monty. If it wasn't for Breaking Point, people would give Dardoch the El Yoya props. They'd go, he really wants to win. He's just fighting. But because we know behind the scenes he was being a prick, actually that interpretation of the same players becomes so different. When he says, bye-bye, piggy, or whatever, like, that isn't cool. You know, we know he's being an asshole there. You're right, that's a great example.
Yeah, it's because of the additional context, but lacking that additional context, which, by the way, again, as much as I love Breaking Point, just objectively, that should have never been released. I'm grateful it exists, but
that should have been like leaked footage, if you know what I mean. Like, that should be like the producer was like mad when he left, so he just leaked all that shit. The idea they just put it and then slapped their name on Team Liquid. Like, your mind, okay.
I love it. I'm so glad they did it. I'm so glad they did it. We need more of that kind of shit. But I'm just saying that usually teams don't want that harsh a light shown on their behind, what was actually going on. But it also proves a point, which is that you have no idea without that footage or without insiders what the hell is going on within these teams. So it's very difficult to judge player attitudes unless you have deep knowledge.
That's why I love the LPL, because they will also put something like that out. But that's because they want to know that when we lost, I bollocked the fuck out of these players. Like, I told them they're all shit and fucking in their culture. That's actually a positive. They're like, oh, brilliant. Oh, I was worried about that squad, but he seems to have it under control. Like, they take that as a point of pride. I know
it probably like lessens toxicity. Honestly, because they're like, I can't believe that. The fans are probably like, I can't believe that player threw, and then they just get to watch the coach just reaming out a player, or a player reaming out another player. Like, yes, that scratched the edge. I don't have to be nasty anymore. They're doing it for me.
By the way, I've just realized there's another drama. There's so much happening this last week. We didn't even get to this. I have got a take. I feel like nobody's crystallized it the way I would say it. Everyone else has been pointing out that stupid Mad Lions versus Gen.G tweet where the LCK account, because Mad Lions, to banter, because in Europe we just make fun of ourselves, they were like, yeah, Gen.G win, Gen.G win, even though they're Mad Lions, right? So then when the LCK account was like lions and tigers, handshake, right? Stop for a second, guys. Everyone else was making these points. Well, the LS and them were like, well, you have to understand they're two animals that are like quite similar, and obviously like a lion and a tiger are two cats, and it's like they're sort of nodding and saying, I get your thing. No, I'll make it simpler than that. Do you actually think the LCK account would make fun of T1 and cheer against the greatest org in the history of Korean esports? Do you even know what Kesper is? Do you know what Kesper is? Like, it is, even the concept that you think, here's what I'm sick of on the internet. It's true.
I just don't even understand why it was
true. You can interpret anything, in theory, right? You can interpret anything the way you want, but you have to ask, what is the most likely intention? And the way everyone else was reading it, like, well, obviously they're just mocking him and making, like, that doesn't make any sense. None of the evidence, circumstantial considerations are taken. Like, to me, that was an absolute nothing burger, bro. That was nothing. And they still got mad over it. Come on.
I have no idea what the T1 fans were even angry about. Like, allegedly, this is literally the tweet, guys, before the T1 Mad Lions game. It was lions, handshake emoji, tigers. And somehow that was interpreted, including by Joe Marsh, by the way, as somehow offensive towards T1, as though the official LCK account was rooting against T1, which
inconceivable.
So also, guys, let's just say this. You guys need to pick one. So is the following true? Are we cheering for individual teams at international events, or are we cheering for regions? Please tell me which one of them it is. Now, I just take it team by team, because I think regions are irrelevant at international events, in my opinion. I just want to see the best teams in the world competing, and I don't really care where they're from or which region is winning, as long as I get to see some sick League of Legends. So I don't think that there was any kind of shade being thrown by the LCK account. To your point, Duncan, like, as a Broncos fan, okay, there are jokes within the Broncos fan base, including calling other teams with horse mascots horse bros.
There you go.
And it's
like the Colts, obviously. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fist bump horse bros, like
yes.
Colts. It's like the Broncos have nothing to do with the Colts, but we interact, like the fans interact with other fan bases being like, oh yeah, horse bros, go horse bros. And it's just like, it's stupid. It's literally just a similar mascot with the Colts.
Yes.
Right. But it's the same, just kind of joking around and playful banter.
And here's the weirdest thing. I would get it if the LCK account inappropriately had responded in kind and also said mad win. They didn't. They just said Lions and Tigers. If anything, they agreed, yeah, Gen.G should win. They were agreeing that the fucking Korean team should win. What are we even doing here? It's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. I can't handle it.
I just don't understand.
Absolute nothing.
I just don't understand why no one will actually. I think this comes to a larger point about League of Legends when we go back to the Spanish fans as well, which is why will no one speak up against these psychotic fan bases?
They won't do it, mate.
Why will nobody be like,
it's worse? They make it sound like the extreme ones saying the hateful shit are the cool normal ones, and that you're dissing the other. I hate when people do that, mate. When they pretend like, when you say it's fucked up what T1 fans did, you mean the guy who's just sat with his T1 flag saying nothing in his house in Seoul. Like, what the hell? I just love T1. Why would we be talking about him? You only do that to deflect, by the way, like the Spanish guy did, from what you did. What you're basically saying is like, oh, so you're attacking all of us. So here's one of the worst things, by the way, about people who make themselves the victim. They make themselves the victim to justify doing whatever they want to the other person. As soon as they're the victim, carte blanche, they can do anything they want. So it's actually an excuse to hide behind your own toxicity. Like in this scenario, and by the way, Spanish and French fans, you can call out the other side. You don't have to then, oh, but did our side do something? No, you just call out what's wrong. Call out what's wrong throughout the whole scene, and we're all good. It'll get taken care of. Because I'm with you. In that scenario, what makes me sick is this, Monty. Joe Marsh, the people at Esports Maniacos, Ibai, people on the fucking French scene, OTP or whatever, you could actually, for real, you won't get to most of them, but you could probably take a solid 20% of those fans down a level if you just come out and go, look, guys, I understand your passion for the game. I understand you were young and you're upset about it, but this isn't who we are. You know what? We're French, we're Spanish. We support our players, but we don't hate the other player. If you did that, you actually might sort of like get through to someone. Yeah, here's the problem. It's why they do it, Monty. They know some of the fans will get pissed off at them and be like, yeah, if you're not with us, they'll be like, they'll treat you like a traitor. But that's the point we're making here, is be the fucking adult in the room. Be the leader. Don't play to your own, because that's the one with I've had my problem with Joe Marsh. Here's the thing. I laugh at him being an idiot and having stupid thoughts about esports, but that's just here and there. There's plenty of people I think are silly in esports.
Sure.
But one thing I despise, and I'll never forgive him for, is he never took the steps he needed to when that LS shit was going on back in 2020.
Yep.
And it's just the same thing again. What happens is when trucks come, Joe Marsh doesn't say, guys, I get the message, but this is misguided. He just says like, sorry, I hear what you're saying. We'll do better. That's like the vibe. And you do not tell a toxic fan that, by the way. You don't tell someone who's essentially physically intimidating you that he's cool for doing it. That is not what esports I want to be a part of.
Well, especially, I mean, the hilarious part about Joe Marsh is that he capitulated to the fan base on a variety of issues, including the LS one. And then when he did something that made the fans angry, he basically had to grovel because he said something.
On the Discord, guys. You mean? Yeah, I remember.
He said it was dumb what he said on the Discord server about
It was just a throwaway thing, though, obviously.
But like, should a CEO of a company be like sexualizing one of the players? No. But was it the end of the world? Absolutely not. But because of his precedent that he had set previously, there was no one to defend Joe Marsh when the trucks came for Joe Marsh. You know what
it really was that thing, you know. When LS was attacked, I said nothing because I was Joe Marsh
when
and I
the
wanted the
trucks
T1 fans
came for LS.
Exactly. But then when they came for me, there was
When
no
the
one
trucks-
because I am Joe Marsh. There you go. It's a bit like he's mixed together the Pagliacci story from Watchmen with that famous thing about Nazi Germany, sadly. What a world. What a world.
But I do think that, you know, and the Mad Lions gave kind of a nothing statement about it too, where it's like nobody is willing to call out the language and just be like, hey guys, we love you as fans, but this is not an appropriate way to interact with our players. I think it's a really relatively straightforward thing to say. And like, we're not going to tolerate our players being treated like this. Like,
I'll tell you, as someone who's an expert, Monty, in having people attack you, people have the dynamic wrong. I actually don't really do this. I do it with the fan bases that really piss me off because they can have it till the end of time. Other ones, I am just giving it takes. And because I'm not like you, I'm not 17, a little kid in esports, I have a very different perspective on the game. Oftentimes, my unique takes are just my opinion. But I'll tell you this, like, look at the career of Skip Bayless. Does hating the analyst and talking shit about him reduce his popularity and exposure and crush his career and make people not want to hire him, or does it increase it? Like, I would actually say this. If you tell these fans off, Monty, a psycho fan isn't going to tune out of the LCK broadcast or the LVP broadcast. You know, they're not going to. They're going to watch the game. They might hate on you in the Twitch chat. So the idea, like, you're essentially like, it's not even a business interest thing. You're not going to lose all your fans and all your sponsors and all your thing if you sort of like politely take a stand on this matter. You're not going to. Pandering to them doesn't really help anything. I don't even think it increases your numbers, mate. I think I could even argue you might put off sort of more reasonable fans. They might just go, bloody hell, I don't want to be part of a bunch of ultras. I just want to watch video games and cheer for Faker or whatever, or Niski or El Yoya.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I don't get it either.
Should we talk about some more games?
Sure. Let's talk about some more games.
By the way, Monty, I alluded to it earlier. Mate, I am one of the best ever in esports at being stubborn when you should be stubborn. So, for example, you know how way back in the day, I wouldn't give it up to you that Name was shit because he fucked up Season 4 Worlds. Yeah, he never got another chance at it. He never got a chance to prove me right. If everyone notices, yes, I know Knight has come into Worlds after Worlds, and it's never been what he was in the LPL. And when we're all telling you he's one of the best, he's the best ever, he's the best not to win Worlds, his team fight, you don't see it that much. Mate, this is why I double down. Because this is the dream. This team finally for Knight is the dream. He has a super stable superstar ADC, and his top laner is a god at basically playing like tanks behind at weak side and letting the 2 stars go off. And what you saw in this tournament here is, mate, this is why I still think JDG will win MSI, because you have to beat them down really hard, really early on, because if they get any tools in a team fight, they are fucking amazing. They like, actually, for real, like the BLG versus JDG, those were some of the best team fights I have ever seen in League of Legends. They were holy shit. They were, as in, if you want, I bet you were loving it, mate, because even the team losing the team fight is doing all the counters and the parries. It was like some godlike Street Fighter moment. It was unbelievable how good those fights were. It wasn't just like the person on the ADCs killing everyone. No, everyone's playing beautifully, moving. It's like you could do one of those Jack team fight breakdowns from years ago. This would be like the best episode ever.
Yeah, I think especially the third game of this series when Knight was on Syndra, because the most amazing thing about that was people will focus on Ruler because, I mean, Knight had a fat stat line too, but Ruler obviously was playing Zeri, cleaning up a lot of these fights. But the thing is that Billy was really dedicated with Bin and Yagao into getting on top of Ruler in those fights. And to me, the most amazing thing was just the way Knight and the rest of the team was peeling for Ruler, because it was the scatter the weaks from the Syndra, you know, frequently multiple times in a team fight where they would wait for Jack's leap strike to be off cooldown, and then mid animation there's like a stun cancel from Syndra.
He really was doing like the anime. He force pushed them back or something. It was amazing, wasn't it? I know it was amazing.
It was great to watch. I mean, just the CC setup. You know, the mind games going on between the teams in terms of those cooldowns, like trying to get the advantages. It was really fun to watch. And especially, like I said, that third game of the series. I think my concern with JDG has not really been allayed by this tournament, because I think they over push their advantages at certain points in time. Like, because this is going to sound weird, because they are so confident in team fighting and amazing, sometimes they take bad fights. And
they almost gave one of the games back to BLG.
Yeah.
They almost gave one back, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes they can kind of reach into overconfidence. They also do have trouble when they fall behind early in the game, which we really didn't see in any of these games. It has to be said though that they rarely do that. It is very difficult to beat them in the early game simply because their team fighting around bot lane is so good. And their skirmishing around bot lane is so good. If you play into their game and you opt into like the 3v3 skirmish with the jungler and the bot side, they will frequently get advantages, and then they're very good at snowballing them. Now,
by the way, you know that's even why the super team angle is so sick. Because y'all are going to go, well, I remember Kanavi used to be an MVP. Yeah, 369's a beast. Knight and Ruler speaks to themselves. It's like they've got 4 or 5 players. Guys, even missing was a fucking second all-pro. And for the last 2 years, we won the better supports. This really is a bona fide super team. They've got it everywhere, mate. Like, you get, where do you attack? Where do you attack?
So I think that having watched a bunch of JDG's games during the course of the regular season and their playoff run, there have been moments of weakness, particularly if you can get them behind early. They will continue to take bad fights, basically, and then just lose the game. Another factor that you can attack is Kanavi. Sometimes his pathing isn't the best.
Yeah.
And teams that have had success oftentimes have success by invading Kanavi, and then he reacts pretty badly to that and can die. Sometimes he tries to overforce certain engagements as well. And so I think if you have strong level 1 plans, there's a possibility that you can neutralize Kanavi and then try and get some advantages around potentially mid lane if you are T1 or GenG, right? Part of the issue with this matchup between JDG and Billy has been that Yagao's individual performance has been weaker recently. Even towards the end of LPL playoffs, it wasn't like last summer where Yagao's excellent performance continued through the end of LPL playoffs. He really kind of started to take a dip towards the end of LPL playoffs, and then obviously he wasn't super good in play-in stages, and Bin has been kind of hit or miss. It also just feels like a lot of Billy's strengths, such as Jun's ability to carry junglers, even though we have seen a lot of Nidalee and Kha'Zix, I am really unconvinced that that is the best way to play the game right now, because even the leads you generate on those champions are very difficult to translate into actual wins in the server. So the question becomes like, how perfect of a game do you have to have with a large lead in order to actually put a W on the board with a Kha'Zix or a Nidalee, or what kind of composition do you have to enable that? And I think there's a much more limited scope of compositions that enable those champions. And especially in the case of Nidalee, it feels really hard to build a comprehensive poke composition around the Nidalee with the kind of mid laners that are being picked right now. The J spans that are coming through, the lack of setup oftentimes for a Nidalee in mid and late game, like 5v5 team fights. So it doesn't feel great, I think, to be Billy in this meta. And conversely, if you're JDG, how could this be better for you? I mean, outside of Knight playing some more carry picks, but certainly Knight has had in LPL played Annie very well. The Syndra is always that pocket pick. It's a setup pick that gives you priority in mid lane. His Ahri is phenomenal. Now we're seeing him play the Cassante well. So there are a variety of factors for JDG. 369 can play the tanks. Kanavi can play the tanks coming out of the jungle, and you basically enable Ruler to be a hyper carry. And everybody knows from history what Ruler can do with a lot of peel. I mean, this is a great Ruler meta.
Also, I'll just say as well, Ruler absolutely has adapted to the LPL. Dude, he plays more aggressive than he used to on the old Samsung teams. He used to like walk the line. Dude, he'll go for it now because he knows they will just peel like a motherfucker for him. Their whole job is just keep him safe, get people off him. Then on the other side, the problem BLG has as well is the bin one. This is how I know people don't watch the LPL, because when he has the carry game, your mind's a blow. Oh my God, what am I seeing? Like, yeah, but that's what he does. He is a feast or famine player. If he has like a Jax or something, yeah, he can smash a game. He can also shit the bed in lane, shit the bed from the beginning of the game, fuck it up. He'll keep going for stuff in a way. So the thing for me with BLG is because Yagao hasn't had a great performance, the other teams can see that. It's telegraphed. And so all they do is they just go balls deep on that Elk guy. They just go, you know what, Elk, if you get fucking killed, this shit's over. And so it makes it really hard, because I'll tell you what, the difference is they're not the same fucking peel team on the side of BLG, mate. Like JDG, like you say, they know exactly how they want to play these team fights out.
Well, it's also that Elk was getting a lot of hype, and I think Elk has been a good player, but you also saw some of Elk's flaws in this series. He was greeting for objectives.
The one where he walked back in was mental. When he got saved and he walked back into that tower.
He did grief some of these games.
That was wild.
I mean, I think part of it is that
that was a double lift all local.
Elk probably feels like he has to carry even harder in some of these games just because of the deficiencies on his team at certain points in time. But as good as Elk looked, and as big as the hype was around Elk, just remember who he was playing against. Out of the Asian teams, Elk is the worst remaining AD carry.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, we're talking about Pays, Gumayusi, Ruler, and Elk, and I would say Elk is the worst of these. You could make an argument with Pays, perhaps, but even Pays, I think, showed immense, poise during the end of the LCK playoffs. He didn't seem rattled by being in an arena. I don't think that the losses that he was suffering in the T1 matches were his fault necessarily. Certainly, he's not as experienced as Ruler or Gumayusi at this point in time. Certainly Ruler is by far the most experienced, but he did have a pop-off game in game number 4. And oftentimes I wasn't left thinking that this was Pays' fault. Now, I think Pays' biggest problem was that he simply wasn't there in the team fights. Like, basically, that was a GenG team problem where he would take a later recall, and when the engagement started to happen in the T1 GenG series, he was still walking through the jungle. So he just wasn't there in a lot of the fights. So I think it's kind of unfair to judge him because his team was opting into engagements when they knew he wasn't there. And I think being kind of behind the play was a big part of GenG's loss in that series. They didn't get that many opportunities to fight, on even strength because T1 was constantly forcing objectives because they were a step ahead. They would get the early recall, then they would be at the dragon. And then, GenG would be facing down, third or fourth dragon, and they had to fight, and Pace just wasn't there. So I think that's going to change the next time we see GenG play. And I would also, when it comes to GenG, I would urge people to remember that they did lose to T1 in the LCK playoffs, and it was their adaptations afterwards that really sealed them a championship win. I don't think this team's going to run back these same strats because they didn't do that in LCK playoffs. They adapted really fast. And so I think the next match we see against GenG is going to be really different priority in the pick and ban. And I think they're going to sort their shit out and still have a really good shot at winning this thing.
Oh, absolutely. They could make the final. I mean, it'd be very interesting. Obviously, we'll have to see if it's JDG or T1 that's waiting for them in the lower, but I could see them running the lower bracket. They're a really good team.
Right. But I would just say, too, about the JDG versus Billy matchup is that JDG looked amazing. They looked like tournament favorites. And absolutely, they can still win this thing. But you also weren't seeing their flaws within this series because they were getting their way a lot of the time. And I think if you imagine for a moment, and we are going to luckily see this matchup very soon, which is T1 versus JDG. Imagine if T1 was running those level 1 Scion like bot dive strats against JDG and was getting advantages out of them. And you also have to remember that T1 is one of the best teams at the world at diving bot lane. And if you set Ruler and missing behind, it's a key to victory. I think perhaps we see some T1 games where they have set level 1s where they get a push in and where they are attempting to like early dive bot lane with a Poppy or an Elise. Like these are definitely things, or a Kha'Zix. Like these are definitely things that can happen from T1. And we know how good they are at setting this up. Now, obviously, JDG is going to be very aware of this, but frankly, every team in the LCK was aware that T1 did this, and very few people could stop it.
No, man, this is where I'll give you an angle. If you want to be a T1 fan and get hyped, here's an angle. When we were talking about, like, historically, you just can't give Knight Syndra. Tell you what, if he's on Syndra and Faker's on a Roman champion, he ain't going to be able to match the fucking Rome, is he? Like, it's the slowest fucking champion in the universe, Syndra. Like, Faker's going to be all the way down. Remember, Faker isn't trying to smash the lane. He's just trying to make the team win. So I think it takes certain options off the table or makes them less effective.
Yeah, and it does feel like a great meta for Faker.
I think it's awesome.
I mean, it's a really good meta. I mean, think about the viable champion pool that Faker has. Now we know he can play Cassante. His Gragas, he's the best mid lane Gragas in the world. He's good at Annie. He's good at Ahri. He's good at Lissandra. He's now playing the Nautilus. Like, what do you want from this guy that we haven't seen? There's no way to ban him out, and he's going to figure out ways to be effective.
Oh, by the way, here's another thing narratively. The other thing that sucked about both Knight and Chovy is not only should they have been this generation's Faker rookie, but also bloody avoided each other a million times. But even worse, like they always used to go to the same worlds and be on the other side of the bracket or not play each other. And so you never got that cool matchup. Like obviously JDG used to just play all the fucking Chinese teams. And then in this scenario, it'd be all Chovy versus every LCK mid laner. Well, here's the thing. I always,
or
first
Korean
of all,
mid laners who are in China. One of the two.
First of all, there might actually be a world where we get the Chovy versus fucking JDG match. Maybe it's a lower bracket final or something. That might happen finally. And they are like two people who both respect each other. But here's the other thing that's cool. One thing I really appreciate about Faker is he's clearly nowhere near the number one player he used to be a long time ago. And he doesn't even play to be like the hard carry. But one thing I hate in games is where someone's really great, but then they either like get really shit so they're not relevant or they just retire, right? Because one thing I always think, coming from a fan of MMA, is it's actually really important in MMA that you get name value on your resume in terms of wins. So when you're the next like GOAT type player, you need to be able to beat the old GOAT player, like Michael Jordan beating Magic Johnson or whatever, you know. You have to have like the old guy has to hang on long enough so that you topple him. So it's like the passing of the torch. You get the chance. Like if Knight now smashes T1 and Faker just gets bodied in mid lane, tell you what, suddenly the Knight story gets fucking amazing. And by the way, here's the angle people don't think about with Knight. Because Xiaohu always was trying this cool-ass Faker-esque style that he's doing on the map, no one really thinks of Xiaohu as the superstar. And all the other mid laners in Korea, in LPL, were the Koreans, Monty. If an actual Chinese mid laner was to win MSI as like the stud carry, bro, get ready for like the top to blow off the hype of League of Legends. Because we always used to say, remember, aside from Xiaohu winning MSI, we were always just like, does it really count? You're just basically using Koreans to win, aren't you? Like, you're sort of like NA taking and Bjergsen. It's like, is he really your player? Bro, if they do it with actually mainly Chinese players, in this case, Knight is the middle, that's going to be a whole different ball game. I couldn't wait for that.
I think there's still going to be a lot of fan hype around Ruler, just because Ruler has been so excellent. And because...
Well, the joke is it gives the Koreans like a reason to like JDG too, doesn't it? Because they just pretend Ruler's doing it all.
It's just like I did feel like the fan reaction, especially in game 3, which to me was a Knight carry performance rather than a Ruler, was still overshadowed by Ruler because Ruler's the one cleaning up the fights.
You'd like this.
Kills.
I saw the thread where it was like translated, like the Korean broadcast, player of the game 1, Ruler, game 2, Ruler, game 3, Ruler. It's like, I get it, Cloud Templar. I get it. I'm just saying that Chinese kid in Midlands, pretty fucking good, isn't he? Because another thing about Knight, I referenced it earlier with the stopwatch usage. Mate, in general, the way he plays around team fights is amazing. Sometimes I think he's fucking up, like, he's not getting in there, but it's like he's actually like waiting, baiting out an ult, like waiting for the chance to do all of his fucking combo on Syndra. Oh, he's fucking, the way they play around the team fight is so clever. They don't just go in as a big death ball and die.
Also, I think 369 super underrated because he's playing tanks, but the space he creates is just amazing. And if I mean, he does super well in a lot the top.
If I'm Ruler, he's my best mate. Side. He is my best friend. You know what I mean? I'm getting him the ramen before the game, the fucking hot pot, whatever you want, mate. You tell me. You keep picking those fucking tanks on me and bringing you a coup de la.
Yeah, I love watching 369 play. He's like slowly becoming one of my favorite players, I think.
And he's got swag. He really does.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't get the solo kills. He's not even trying to do the bin swag of like, I just stomp them all. It's more like he has that thing that I actually think when it works is terrifying. It's a bit like Gen.G as a team. It's like, get ahead. I always come back anyway. I always find a way in the game. That's a really demoralizing feeling when you feel like you can never be enough ahead. You're supposed to believe if I'm ahead, I'm winning.
You can still make the play, right?
Yeah, exactly. You say, are you? If I get an item or two, don't worry about me, mate. I'm in the fight.
Yeah, he's definitely a fun player. I really enjoy watching JDG these days. I would just say that as much as the hype was there, just remember that some of these games could have been won by Billy realistically, and that JDG is likely not to have some of the same advantages against teams like T1 and Gen.G.
No.
So
that's why it's going to be a good test. Because here's the fun thing, Monty. Isn't this the dream? You love fucking styles make fights, right? So you've got the fucking team with the draft, the flexes, the whole fucking angle. Because by the way, there's a great answer to my question earlier. What do you do when you can't ban out all the star players of JDG? Have all flexes all over the draft so they don't even know where it's going themselves and they can't build their comp the way they want? Then also, this is the team where if you wanted to have a team that could dive and do picks early and focus on objectives, There's T1, but then JDG has the amazing team fighting. This is a fucking awesome matchup. This is a dream for an upper bracket final. And if it doesn't deliver, you've got the lower bracket and the final itself. We can't lose, basically. It's sick. I can't wait, mate.
Yeah, I do hope that T1 wins. And it's not because I care that T1 beats JDG in particular, but I really want to see JDG versus GenG. And there's, there's a possibility that if T1 gets knocked to the lower bracket, that we see T1 versus GenG, T1 wins again, and then we see a T1 versus JDG rematch in the final, which again is not terrible, but I think JDG probably matches up better against GenG than they do against T1. And so I would just really, really like to see that matchup.
And it'll be Knight versus Chovy, finally.
Yes.
Also, I'll just throw this out there. Technically, I've realised, I've only got a bloody cat, haven't I? So now all the LCK fans, bloody hell, what have I done? What have I done, mate? Who knows? Fucking hell. Too much of it.
So yeah, I think as for the coming matches.
Oh wait, there's one other thing as well. I got really sad though, because you might have seen this. Right, the LPL fan club account, which actually, by the way, is cool as fuck to follow because it tweets in English all the interesting details about their game. Right, they tweeted, and apparently the person doing it, because I assume they're like a second generation Chinese person or something, they even had to delete the tweet and said sorry. Like basically, even I don't always understand Chinese subtlety and stuff. One of the hypest things ever got taken away from us. Originally, there was a tweet before this match now of JDG T1 where the quote was Knight just going, "I find Faker to be weak." And then they'd capitalized weak. And I was like, Giga Chad, holy shit, boys. Because remember, Koreans are supposed to like, be polite. Well, it would be a great game. I think it'll be better. Exactly. The idea that Knight just goes, "I think you're weak, son." But apparently that wasn't it. Apparently he really just said something else that wasn't quite like that. And it was more like, whatever. Mate, if that'd really been a thing that they'd said, I was ready for that powder keg to just blow up and have the absolute war of LPL fans and LCK fans. I was so ready for it, mate. I can't believe you took that from me. Whatever.
Come on, Knight.
Because I want the villains. I want villains. Exactly. I want villains.
You have until Thursday to talk some smack. Let's get it rolling, guys. It's such a hype matchup.
See, the sad thing is, because this isn't fucking CSGO, the good thing, if you don't know, guys, is because they won't talk shit in CSGO. This is not a joke if you don't follow CSGO. I talk shit to the players and I get in the drama battles with them to give tension to the matches. I can't do that in League. Like, I can't fucking tweet Knight. He's on Weibo or whatever. And I can't get a message to these guys. So they have to do it for us, I'm afraid. You have to give us some of that banter. By the way, the real problem there is this, I've realized. You can never actually accomplish what you do in LCK, because if you actually did tell the players the same thing, like, we obviously respectfully, guys, but we're going to do a trash talk segment. The problem is, to tie into the earlier point, because it's a nationality thing, the fans would go mad no matter what. So you can't really do unfortunately, you can't really bait it out of them. At this point in time, you almost hope they don't say that, because the backlash if they lost would be so insane.
We'll have to wait for the Asian games later this year. That's potentially when that will start showing up a little bit more. By the way, guys, if you didn't know, the reason why Worlds is late this year is because, again, Riot has done scheduling shenanigans around the Asian games that were, they screwed up their entire schedule for the Korean League, LCK, last year, and did ridiculous things because the Asian games were supposed to happen. And then, of course, they were canceled due to the COVID issues in China and the lockdowns that were happening. And so they did it all for nothing, including like actually causing certain teams to lose games within the LCK because they refused to reschedule them when some of the teams got COVID, and that pissed off a lot of the teams within the LCK and was completely ridiculous, because the core competition should be at all times the leagues. Okay. Remember how the NHL didn't send players to the Olympics because of COVID cancellations?
Yeah.
And so they had to play some of their games during the Olympics time. They're like, well, too bad, no Olympics this year, guys. And for all you Korean fans, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, these are important because the players get military exemption. No, they're not. The core product is still the most important thing. Like, suck it up. Also, it seems like some of the players have gotten military exemptions anyway, turns out. Seems weird that, Deft went from I have to go to the military to suddenly, maybe I can play on D+ Kia this year.
The joke is, you actually might be better just winning 2 Worlds or something. That might get you the exemption better than winning Asian games,
Exactly. So there seems to be some weird stuff going on with players having to go to the military anyway, so we can question really how necessary it is. But I think it's absurd that we have to start Worlds so much later this year just because the Asian games are taking place. Maybe if they're not canceled again. Otherwise, we look really stupid, but probably won't be canceled this time around. Sure. That's a throwback to all the ridiculousness that happened last year when the entire world had to just bend over backwards for an Asian games that were being canceled. Totally absurd. So yeah, I think moving into this next phase of the bracket, though, we do have at least one interesting matchup in the next couple of days, which is BLG versus G2, which is probably not as unwinnable as a lot of G2 fans are thinking.
Here's the thing, fair play to Mickey X and G2. They're hyping it because they all keep mentioning, like, it's scrims, we're doing it. All I'm going to say is, like, watch out for us from the script. Yeah, we get it, okay. But the problem with that is, like, they also said that, Doinby said that about the Western teams before the bracket began, and we saw the first round went. So I know what you mean, but Scrimbox can be, the currency of Scrimbox fluctuates a lot, Monty.
To be fair, Doinby said that about the play-ins teams. Remember that the good teams weren't there yet when he was talking about the West scrims.
Oh, right. Results. I see what you mean. Okay.
I'm sure the Western teams were doing great against the minor region teams and also maybe Billy, but it's not like, the big guns.
I thought you meant when they just got there or something, like when they just arrived.
No, I think it was before. I could be wrong, but I think it was before that. I'm pretty sure it was before that. So anyway, I think like, yeah, G2, they have been making noise about their scrim results, but they also took 4th place in LEC when they had a 75% scrim win rate that was released by Roman, their manager, after
and that was
they
a mega
lost
winnable
the
series as well. It was very winnable.
Yeah. So I think with G2, the inconsistency of their performance is really what we should be discussing. However, I do think that their unique facets regarding especially their jungle champion pool and the way they set up for Belveth and the way they set up for Yike in general does make this a somewhat compelling matchup, especially against Jun, another jungler who likes to play kind of these carry jungles. Like, we could see a very cool jungle matchup in this series. Now, Caps has not had a great tournament, but neither has Yagao. So what does that mean? Is there going to be an angle there for Yagao to take over? I don't know.
Do you know? And obviously, the way the clips work, they don't come up the same day. The amount of clips we had that we released, that were obviously we talked about it the week before. How many did we just nail there, mate? Like, I had the whole one about fucking, like, you'll never get, like, GenG will just come back in every game. You can't beat them. There was the fucking one about, like, the BLG
your
angle.
Mad Lions angle was, like, maybe if Hylissang pops off in the early game, they can do well.
Your only chance, yeah, you got to have that. Oh, there's so many angles we have.
No, I said you can't play no TP against GenG because they will just destroy you on the map. And, like, that ended up being very true.
And also another one for me was this. As I said, everyone would say, well, this is the perfect one for Broken Blade, though, because obviously he's had his problems internationally. But you know what, Thorin, when you watch LCK, he's not that impressive, is he? It's like, bro, he is still someone who can win in LCK, though. Like, that means he can hold up against the Zeus of the world. So you saw it here. Like, Broken Blade, I've got to say this, mate. He never was the player that Dom hoped he would be. Just wasn't. He isn't when he's domestically. He can't. And even then, by the way, domestically sometimes has the odd letdown. Internationally, he's just never been. He's just not. Like, the joke is, even though I say Bin's feast and famine, can I have some of the feast games from fucking Broken Blade? When's he going to carry some hard games?
Well, people saw him carrying in play-ins and were like, "Oh yeah, this guy's he's a god now."
He's certainly not a bad player, but
yeah, Robo. I mean, come on, man. He has some good games against some bad tops. I think the issue was he was again exposed during the Gen.G series, because if you are not playing TP, and even if you are playing TP, the thing about playing Gen.G as a top laner is half the game you're going to be in a lane against Chovy. Now you're just going to end up in a side lane and Chovy's going to be there. So, like, are you really playing a one-on-one versus the other top laner? Like, that's not how Gen.G plays the game. And also, when you don't have TP, all of a sudden, you are literally losing to Doran's Fiora. Thorin, not a known Fiora player, by the way. You are literally losing to Doran's Fiora, so you can't stop the split push, and you also don't have TP to get to a fight. So you just double lose. I mean, it's just terrible. It's just terrible. Like, teams with teleport can't keep up with Gen.G's macro. It's hard to beat them with TP, 2 TPs, or 3 TPs if you have an AD carry with TP as well.
I bet you were loving that draft when you saw him go in the game after what you said, and he had Flash Ghost.
Of course he had Flash Ghost. You can't play Darius without Flash Ghost.
No, but like after what you said, you even said you have to have the TP. I know, it's perfect. It's too good. It's too good.
I will admit, Thorin, I was surprised that they banned Olaf, because I thought they would want to play into Flash Ghost Olaf. well, I thought they would think, well, he's got the Olaf, so screw it. Like, who cares? He's not going to be running TB. But they banned the Olaf through the whole series.
And by the way, there's another thing as well. I'll give this to Yike. He's had some good games where he got kills and he had chances and he gave them like agency at times. But here's the other thing. Man, they're not giving this guy any breaks. He starts out against Gen.G on an Italy. Woo! Brother, like that's a tight. You're on the tightrope immediately with no nets. Like here's the one thing I'll give them. If he ever does like develop into some like god jungler, like they're making him level up. This is the fucking dojo he's in right now, mate. He's playing against all the masters. Like this is a hard way to go. I would have hit him a few games. Like can I ever get a game off? Can I just chill for a while?
It's also the way that. I mean, it's also the comp that Nidalee is picked in. So basically, yes, you have set up in the lanes for the Nidalee with the Darius and the Lissandra, the Braum. Braum not super good for Nidalee setup, but the Lissandra and the Darius are okay. But the thing is that you have to get those early advantages for your lanes, not for Nidalee, because Nidalee is so useless in this composition. It is fucking ridiculous in the late game because everyone else is incredibly low range. So you have no poke synergy. And so what are you going to do? Like if your lanes aren't ahead, you basically can get kited forever by Gen.G's composition. You get outplayed on the map because you have one fewer TP. And I mean, that's pretty much what we saw. You also just have no wave clear, basically, or very low amounts of wave clear with Lissandra and the Draven. So once the siege gets set up, really tough to play. And also the Vi into the Draven is very, very bad.
You actually, by the way,
if the Draven dies, there's no other real damage on your team because Caps was having such a weak performance.
Would you actually? Do you actually call that G2 will do the upset? Will they beat BLG?
I think it's unlikely.
I feel like if I actually felt like there's another one I fucking nailed on that episode. Where are these Caps pop-offs we were used to? Do they ever happen anymore? Am I missing something? He's not. He just doesn't seem to be that player. If I had the old Caps where like at least 2 games he's going to like smash on some crazy, then I'd be like, wow, this might be interesting. But I just sort of feel like it can be competitive, but BLG it feels inevitable they win still to me.
I think it's really hard to see how I think G2 can win, but it's a really narrow opportunity for that victory. I mean, maybe if the Draven's not banned and G2 can get some really solid advantages through the bot side and kind of neutralize Elk. I do think that there was a blueprint for how to beat BLG that was shown by Golden Guardians as well as JDG. Golden Guardians came from behind because Elk was the only carry threat on the team.
And they realized that,
in the play-ins. And if they had enough backline dive and they chained CC well enough onto Elk, even with a Lulu for Peel and a team based around peeling for him, they were still able to take that win. So if G2 is going to play some really like beefy, high CC compositions around Hans Sama, then perhaps they could do that. The problem is that they don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how they're playing stylistically right now. They're trying to empower Yike and get him ahead in a lot of these games, and they put a lot of their carry eggs in the Yike and Broken Blade basket. And I just, when you are in a carry battle versus Bin, I just don't think Broken Blade wins that. And when you're in a carry battle versus Jun, I think that Yike may not be able to pick up that burden as well. So it just seems like kind of a bad matchup for G2 where their strengths are more or less the same strengths as BLG, but worse. And then you don't have a big mid lane advantage and you don't necessarily have a big bot lane advantage either. So here's what I will say. I think G2 doesn't get 3 out. I think they win a game or 2 in this series. But I think the best way to combat Billy is just to play around neutralizing Elk. And so if you can do that through aggressive bot lanes and some fancy level 1s where you can get advantages, maybe take out the jungler or get some good bot dives going in, perhaps that's a road to victory. But I think Broken Blade, I don't want to see his Kennen anymore. Like I don't want to see him playing a lot of these carry matchups.
Because the problem, I've said it the whole time, I said it in that clip, is especially if other people are going to show weakness in G2. I have to put it in the Caps carry basket. I can't have a series, Monty, where he shows up and plays fucking Annie twice, Lysandra, and then finishes it off with Ori and Sol. Like, that can't happen. This is supposed to historically be the player who can do it, who can actually be like the fucking chosen one and take BDD and put him in the fucking trash can and then go head to head with Showmaker in a game. Like, that Caps isn't here at the moment. I don't know if it's just like he's changed his mentality, if he's just being a team player, if he's playing to the draft, but give me some carry angle, please. Because as we said before, the Yagao one, this is the mid laner that you got the best chance against to do that with. It's the best one you're going to get.
I mean, clearly G2 believes that enabling Yikes carry champions and Broken Blades carry champions are the way in which they win the game.
I would guess they win the scrims doing that. That must be the assumption,
they must be
right?
winning the scrims doing that. And when they try with Caps, it must be a very different experience. Or perhaps Yike is not performing on some of the more, I would say, supportive or frontline junglers. And that is just, and also the style is weird. So it definitely is going to set certain people, it's going to surprise people, right? Because they play differently than any of the other teams that are at MSI, particularly around the Belveth. And now, as we saw in the Bad Lions series, they debuted this top Cassiopeia. There are clearly a lot of issues with top Cassiopeia, where in isolation, if you can isolate the 1v1 in top lane, she can be quite good. If Cassiopeia starts dying in top lane, that's where it becomes an absolute nightmare, because she just, you get her in a long lane, you get a frozen wave on her, and she becomes really, really vulnerable. And Broken Blade had some, very solid games on the Cassiopeia top where they were able to surprise Mad Lions, but it's no longer a surprise. So now that it's not a surprise, like Bin will certainly have something to try and combat that. They'll have new strategies available in that top lane, and they may just play very heavily around the top side BLG with jungle and top. So yeah, I guess we're going to find out. I do think G2 has a chance of winning this series, though. It's probably like a 30% chance or 25% chance, but I think they can be competitive. And if they can get enough neutralization on Elk, I think anybody can beat Billy.
Because the problem is, there's another series, isn't there? But I'll tell you what, boys. There's not a lot to talk about, because I did also tell you about Cloud9. The hopium was maybe Fudge can do. First of all, forget that. The Fudge Kool-Aid has gone off, boys. It's like it's past its sell-by date. Fucking send it back. Or maybe it only works in North America with the warmer climate or something. I don't know. But it didn't show up so far. That was irrelevant. And then also, like, it's basically just Berserker versus the fucking world when they play against the Asian teams. Like, you can't do it, mate. Even the blabber angles. Everyone tells me all of this. It's like, mate, it just doesn't happen the way you think it will. Because the real problem, I think, is this. When they were in LCS, because mid lane is dog shit, MNS did look like a revelation, like this fucking mechanical prodigy, right? Where was that? Am I missing something? The joke is you go in, it doesn't happen, does it? You try to do the flashy move, nothing happens. You got, like, mate, they play every day of their lives against Knight, fucking rookie. They're playing the fucking goated mid laners. They know what mechanics are. You're not going to shock them. So in this scenario, it's like the MNS angle, non-existent. The fucking Fudge angle ain't working. It's like, you haven't got much left at that point. You haven't got much left. This is Gen.G. Of all the teams, like I said before, to me, it's funny because JDG will knock you the fuck out. T1's a nightmare to play against. But I think Gen.G, if you're Western, is just demoralizing to play against. Like I said, you can never be far enough ahead. You always feel like they're going to come back, They're always going to come back. They're always going to find gold that shouldn't be there on the map. They're going to play smart. Chovy's always going to get his leads. What can you do, mate? What can you do?
Yeah, I appreciate Cloud9's some, creativity. They tried to lane swap MNS on LeBlanc into the top side against Billy, so they'd have a more favorable matchup and not have to play Sion into Gwen. And they put Fudge back in mid lane. Like, they have some unique versatility, especially because Fudge did spend a while playing mid lane for them. But the thing about MNS is, like, he was completely useless on LeBlanc once he was in that top side matchup. He was really just inconsequential on the scope of that game as a whole. And as you say, Berserker looks amazing. He looks like he does have world-class mechanics, world-class team fighting ability when he's paired off against some of these teams. But even then, Golden Guardians was able to take a game, although it was kind of fraudulent, as we said many times, against Billy, and Cloud9 was not. And I just don't see, if they're losing to Billy like this, I just don't see an angle for Cloud9 whatsoever in this matchup.
Because, bro, like,
this is a nightmare match.
I won't be a dick and go and find the thread or whatever. I'll be doing the separate stuff on that later, don't worry. But Everyone, dude, I'm not joking. For real, people were saying M&S was going to like gap Yagao. For real. Yagao didn't even do anything. He just sat back and went like, is that all you got? Like something like they didn't happen, did it?
Also M&S was
Andy's a fucking rookie. He's a super rookie.
M&S was doing things like playing Galio into Syndra and stuff too. So it's like, well, you know, if you want M&S to gap somebody, maybe don't put them on the Galio. And they really wanted to enable the Kindred in the jungle, right?
And if you think the Yagao one was embarrassing, right? M&S isn't even that good a laner, and he is going to play against essentially the laner in mid lane right now. That Chovy is just going to just grind him out from the beginning of the game, mate. You're not going to be in the game.
It honestly wouldn't surprise me if they tried to like, if Casante's not banned, which I think Casante, because of his flex status now for so many teams, is just going to be ban worthy. We saw Casante get banned very heavily against Gen.G because they were the ones to design the Casante flex pick. And that was like a permaban in the finals from T1. It was a permaban in this latest match against Gen.G as well. But since more teams are able to flex it these days and teams have learned, it's feeling more and more like it's just going to be a permaban from blue side. Just because the flex on red side is just so annoying. Although probably we've seen a lot of like Casante bans on the red side as well, depending on the team. But this is all to say, like, maybe there's a world where they try it, like Cloud9 tries to take the Casante and then have Fudge play it, and Fudge lane swaps into mid because we know they like to do these kind of angles. Okay. And if that's the case, then perhaps Fudge can do, you know, kind of well in some of these matchups against Chovy because Casante is just so ridiculously good, especially in mid lane, at getting push and advantage on the map, that perhaps that's a strategy they might attempt to use, but also it requires Casante to be up. So I think there may be some like bruisers that Fudge might try and play in mid lane just to neutralize the Chovy advantage.
I can see
but
that
at the end
angle.
of the day, that's not going to happen. Like, it's not going to do anything.
No, and also there's the other side of the matchup. I can see that angle, but then it's like M&S. It's like Bin's like, oh, you think mechanics are your friend? Like, mate, all he does is try to outplay people 24/7. I'll just throw. There's two things I want to say about M&S. One, I will give him this. He is a rookie who's barely even played in the bloody LCS, so I'll give him that.
Half a split.
He could go on to be a very good player if he levels his game up and starts to understand more about what to do and how to play from behind, etc. And then the other thing to say is this. Oh, fuck, what was the angle I was going to say? There was one other thing.
He played half a split. How could he get better?
I'm trying to think what it was. Yeah, there was some other angle I was going to give on that, though. Fuck, what is it? Let me just think.
Champion pool.
Oh, no, this is just just a frivolous story and like pointless one, but I'm just going to say it's like to build storylines up. I just saw a clip of him when he was streaming and he was talking, and he does that thing where he just eats with his mouth open. Like, look, this is a personal pet peeve of mine, but I already pull against you for that. Just for that alone. He was eating fries and they were...
Brother, how do people even do that, man?
Like, I don't know where you grew up, but all I'm saying is close that fucking mouth while you got your food in there. I even can't handle people just eating while on stream. It's like, mute the mic or something, for fuck's sake. I don't want to hear that. I can't even handle people who have gum in half the time. It's my pet peeve. I'm sorry. It's totally frivolous, but I'll put it out there.
Put a noise gate on your microphone, so you have to speak above.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
There you go. Yeah,
as if I actually waited to rack my brain to find that point, but what? Just some insight in it. It's all
very 200th
episode. There's no point changing the habit of a lifetime now, is there? Oh, and also, even though Dom did steal my fucking point, I was right. I said this first. I'm almost certain if you go back and check, right? What I did was, when Mad Lions embarrassed everyone, I was the one who pointed out, technically, are you ready? This is some like fucking Dexter level shit. Technically, it was all Reckless's fault, wasn't it? Because if Reckless had hit that fucking Nexus and hadn't fail flashed, then Mad Lions would never have won. Mad Lions wouldn't have gone to MSI, in which case they couldn't have played these games. It couldn't have started a Spanish-French intra-European civil war, which then led to all this. And then also, Gen.G and the LCK account would never have said Mad Lions. They never have said Mad Lions win, so that would never have happened either. All the bad things that happened at MSI, including Mad Lions, is all Reckless's fault. And now he doesn't even play for Fnatic or in ADC anymore. There you go. I've managed to spin it all back. Understand, I am like Skip Bayless. Reckless is my LeBron, and I will find a way that everything is his fault, no matter what. are, okay? I will do that.
This time.
It was in a fucked up way.
The
Like in the butterfly effect.
Crazy.
Exactly. It's mental, wasn't it?
Yeah, he actually brought all of the bad conflict that we're seeing right now. All the things we were mad about earlier in this episode are directly Reckless's fault because he didn't kill the Nexus on Mad Lions.
Yeah.
Goddamn.
All I'm saying is he might be the League of Legends Antichrist. Look at the pestilence and plagues he has brought upon our fine land.
We could be living in so many parallel universes right now where none of this had ever actually occurred.
It's like that meme, isn't it?
It required a very specific set of consequences.
You know that thing in the world where Nexus hits where Reckless hits that Nexus. You know, we're on the fucking that space colony with the it's going up with all the indog farming, and everyone's got robots. Like, oh, life. Remember when we eliminated war after Reckless hit that Nexus? Like fucking. That's what could have happened, boys.
And now he's just a teamless support player. Goddamn. He might have stayed at AD carry. There's also that possibility too, that had he actually advanced in the tournament and done better, that he would have stayed at AD carry and stayed on Fnatic.
Someone even made this point, I forget who, but I sort of agree. If Fnatic had won that series, bearing in mind they played the Astralis team where, you know, it's hit and miss who would win that game. If somehow Fnatic had actually gotten to the playoffs and come fourth, dude, there's a world where actually probably does stay ADC, right? They probably run it back with the same lineup. By the way, that would also have stopped Mad Lions getting flamed because then they wouldn't have had all the L Pro players. Like the actual amount of fucking butterfly effect things from that one thing, that one fail flash. It's mental, innit? The joke I would say is press F in chat, but I think Reckless has pressed F too much already. There you go. Freebie on the way out, passing shot.
All right, you have any
I have one last question. Here's what we need to do, because there's so many matches before we do the next one. Who wins MSI?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say. I think Gen.G bounces back.
Because I know you're the Gen.G fan out of the three, the more straight. You like their style.
I think what's funny is, like, you know, between you, me, and Dom, I think we all have different picks. I think Dom said T1, you say JDG, really? And I think I'm going to say Gen.G. Despite the loss, I just, when we saw the LCK playoffs and we saw how quickly Gen.G readapted, having lost and come from the losers bracket in that tournament, and I don't think that this is an untenable meta for Gen.G. I think you could easily have Thorin just play tanks in the top side, and then you eliminate a lot of the problems that you were having. I think that if you start to ban out that Scion, or you have better level 1 plans against the Scion, then you can change that narrative around against JDG as well. And when Thorin has been on form, Gen.G looks absolutely amazing. So I think they'll bounce back from this. I think they'll move away from the Wukong pick, and they'll move into more jungle tank picks, and we'll see the resurgence of Peanuts Poppy, which we should have already seen, and I predicted having come into this tournament, but they got around to playing the Poppy rather late in their series against T1. And I think rightfully thought that was not going to be Owner's preference, and also that Owner wouldn't be that good at it, because historically Owner was not a very good Poppy player, but he had a fucking great game against Gen.G, like really, really, really good game.
The reasons why I'm taking, have you done your reasons? You got more?
Yeah, so I think Gen.G still is super strong. I think they're still the best macro team in the world, and I think with a little bit different priority in draft, and the ability to react to T1 strategies, and also the ability to see more matches of their opponents in the final, whether that's going to be T1 or JDG, according to my prediction, I think that they will be able to get it together.
Here's my angle for why JDG wins. One, before I even get into analysis, I am the esports historian. I like narratives. It's just the romance of, like I said, the Chinese mid laner carries and wins the game over the Koreans. You obviously have the amazing team fighting. By the way, if you haven't noticed yet in history, this is what makes me a very unique individual. As an individual player, I like motherfuckers that just constantly win in lane and give themselves a chance so that their teammates don't matter. People who farm up the mid lane, people who farm up AD carry, Upset, Forgiven, Froggen, Chovy, fucking Larson. I like these players. But as a team, my number one favorite style, it comes from even what I like in Dota, is teams who can win team fights from behind. Moscow 5, G2 from 2019, this JDG team. I just find it so compelling, because if you ever watch LCK, the team that's behind in the team fight usually loses, because they play a very similar, like, handshake style, respectful style. I just love the fact that the teams can just fight their way back into the game and just punch you in the face nervous when they're essentially, when you back them into the corner on the ropes, they're giving you the knockout punch and you have to come back again. The game's incredibly exciting. So not only does JDG have that, but then I'll give you the actual reasons why I think they can. One, I think Knight is the only player could actually out fucking Chovy and could beat him in mid lane. I think he's the only one. Faker's not even trying to do that. Faker's on the Zhao Hu tip. We all know that one. Then for the Gen.G side, I actually just think the Peanut angle the Peanut angle does scare me every time I see him in a really big game. I never know if he's going to shit the bed or do something fucking silly. That's really hard when the jungler's a bit dodgy. Kanavi's not that great. He's got his own issues too. I'll give you that. And then I'll also say 369, he doesn't give a fuck about any of these top laners, mate. He can handle both of them. And then I do think they have the best ADC in the tournament. And right now, I do think ADC, if you play around them, wins the game. And especially in these team fights. So then I'll say the one last detail, which is T1, I get why Dom's riding the hype, but this is where I'm also different. If you ever see me as an analyst in CSGO, I don't ever let intra-tournament form overwhelm what I think fundamentally a team is capable of. Because in my opinion, not only between games can you reset, but especially between matches, you can have a total reset. And I think you always come to, there's a famous saying, like, you actually don't like rise to the moment, you fall to the level of your preparation. In my opinion, I'd say you fall to the level of who you are as a team fundamentally. So the key thing here is T1 looks great now, but I've got to see them winning that final, mate. I've seen them look amazing, go to the final, think they're just going to get handed the trophy and then be the guys like, oh, well, I guess we lose again. So I have to see them do it first. And then basically the JDG angle, because it's a new team as well, they don't really know what it is like to properly lose, Monty. They just win all the time at the moment. The joke is, I know why they keep fighting stupid fights where there's like, because essentially they win all the games. Like, why wouldn't they do that? Essentially, the world has taught them this works. So if they can lose, by the way, what I think's cool is I really think it is like these three teams. I don't think there is a clear favorite. I think you can do an angle for all three. It's awesome.
I agree. I think that's what's really fun about this. And I have my arguments for Gen.G. I mean, the arguments for Gen.G are basically this. Like, do you think that they're going to have a better meta read? Do you think Doran's individual performance will improve? Do you think that Hayes is going to be able to carry against some really veteran ADCs like Ruler and Gumayushi in an ADC meta? So these are the question marks for Gen.G. Questions about T1. Are they going to choke in a final? In the last two finals we've seen them in, LCK Spring Playoffs and the World Finals, they looked really unprepared for both of their opponents and kind of cocky going in. And when their opponents countered them or found answers, they didn't respond quickly to that. So even though they have very strong fundamentals and a giant bag of tricks, if they start to reach into that bag and things don't work, then they look really scared and then they default to weird shit that doesn't really work for them anymore. And that has been an issue. Also, for example, is Faker going to be able to hold up? He has underperformed in a lot of these finals. Zeus has underperformed individually in a lot of these finals. Is Zeus the guy to play a lot of tanks very effectively in front-to-back team fighting, which has not been a core part of this roster's identity? For the most part, we've talked about this endlessly.
The meta's playing into the 369 style, isn't it?
Yeah. For the last couple of years, they've been playing this like pick style of composition with a lot of carry top laners, and they've been playing versus skirmishes. They also don't have the greatest Baron setups in the world, even though they frequently get Baron at 20 to 23 minutes into the game. And, they're able to force a lot of these engagements by being very aggressive in terms of their macro, but that can also bite them. So those are the questions around T1, around JDG. Do you believe that, this team, if they fall behind, is going to cleanly execute comeback wins without inting harder? Because I think that's the thing about JDG is once they start to lose, they basically just lose harder and harder and harder a lot of the time. If they get those advantages, can they early snowball? Do you think that Kanavi is not going to be thrown by weird early jungle pathing and that might cause the bot lane to fall behind somewhat? So these are questions around all the teams. Now, they obviously have really big strengths, all of them. Like Gen.G, their biggest strength is their macro. T1, their biggest strength is probably their skirmishing and early game objective control, their play around dragon. For JDG, it's their team fighting and ability to get their bot lane ahead. So these are all things to consider, but I don't think there is a clear-cut favorite at the current point in time. I think it's really hard to call. And it's especially hard to call because we haven't seen a JDG series against a non-Chinese team. Or a Korean team, I should say. we have seen them against a non-Chinese team. But the result was what we expected against Golden Guardians, like a really fierce opponent like Gen.G or T1. And I'm curious to see that.
You want to do the read?
Yeah. And of course, graciously, this show is brought to you by Freeze Pipe, as usual. Love having these guys. You guys have done a great job of buying a lot of Freeze Pipe, supporting the show. We love to have them as a sponsor. And also, they enabled us to make some additional content for you guys, which, if you missed it, by the way, this is evergreen content. You can go back to it, and it's going to be just as funny now as when we released it on 420. We did a 420 special for Freeze Pipe where Thorin and I used our freeze pipes and then watched a bunch of cringe esports content, talked a lot about it, the stories of various games and kind of history of esports, had a good laugh. A lot of you guys hadn't seen that Heroes of New Earth intro before that I had to work really hard to dig up, guys, because they tried very hard to delete that from the internet, so it took some creativity for me to pull that one out, but we got it there. So thanks to FreezePipe for sponsoring that. As usual, guys, if you are looking for some new glass to enjoy some cannabis, you can head on over to www.thefreezepipe.com. Use the code LFN for Last Free Nation for 10% off your entire order. They have bongs, dab rigs, pipes, whatever you want. Yeah, they've got it over there. And of course, what you do with it is they have the food safe glycerin chambers. You pop that into the freezer an hour before smoking. It'll cool the smoke by over 300 degrees. Make sure your throat doesn't get burned and really have a pleasant experience with the freeze pipe. So hope you guys who have purchased yours are enjoying them. Gotten a lot of positive feedback from you guys. I know they have excellent customer service. If anything happens to your order, that's been one of the things that has been, very good feedback from them as well. So go head on over to thefreezepipe.com and support them, support us. Really appreciate that relationship. We are going to go do some questions now from the Discord server. So we'll do that right now.
Right, we're back with viewer questions. Monty's obviously going to take them from the Discord. That is how you ask viewer questions. You support us by going to our Discord, Last Free Nation, subscribing, where we get a nice revenue cut. You also help support the company. And by the way, if you're watching this on Twitch, etc., also chuck that Twitch Prime over here. All the streamers have all the cash money anyway, innit? They're all pissing it away, buying stupid shit. So we'll actually spend it to make esports content and hire some of your favorite people. So Monty will select the good questions. Hopefully not too many are just asking him to do their homework. So, when I said you're supposed to really do your homework to get a good question, I didn't mean like that.
All right. With talks about changing the import rule, shouldn't we be advocating to remove them altogether? There will be no removing of the import rule, as Riot has stated recently with the discussions around the North American Challenger League, which might be another Four Horsemen topic, by the way, because that basically Riot rug pulled the LCS Players Association. And according to the LCSPA, head Phil Aram literally lied to Phil about, basically committing to having the teams run their challenger teams through the end of this year. So that was quite shocking news,
that.
I thought.
Riot lying to someone. Why have y'all got a hate border against Riot? By the way, when you say that, you sound like you just walked in the door 5 minutes ago.
I did appreciate Phil was like, that was the first time they've ever lied to me. It's like the guy with the noose around his neck. It's like, first time.
It's mega, isn't it?
That's how I felt. But anyway, they're not going to change it. And the reason they're not going to change it, guys, is because even though the North American owners have been viciously advocating for this, particularly Reggie, by the way, who is still, as far as I know a lot of people who are at the owners meeting, and he is still beating the drum at the owners meetings about, we got to get rid of the import rule, blah, 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 blah. They're not going to change it, guys, because why would you change it when it would absolutely wreck Europe and Korea, two regions that perform way better in terms of results?
By the way, just to be sure, Monty means add an extra import, not take away imports altogether. I think the question was supposed to be taken all away.
Yeah. Should we be advocating with removing it altogether? I'm fine with that, by the way. I think that you should prioritize Korea and Europe and the regions that are doing well, both in terms of viewership and in terms of competitive performance. There's no point to having unlimited imports because it would literally just kill viewership in bigger viewership regions, and it would make those regions worse. So that what happens? So China can get better. China's viewership's not suffering. They're doing fine. So really the reason would be to bolster North America. But why would you why would you try and sacrifice better performing regions to maybe increase North American viewership? It's not even guaranteed, by the way. You would guaranteed be hurting 2 other leagues to maybe help out North America. It's not worth it. It just doesn't make sense. Plus, you'd piss off way more of your franchise teams by doing that, because there'd be 2 regions of pissed off franchise owners instead of just 1 region of pissed off franchise owners.
The real problem is this, right? Even though I will always sarcastically suggest just getting rid of the import rule altogether, just because it means people like Azael and Mark Z have to actually learn what NA is actually like, and that you were never even within reach of EU, who always outperformed you anyway. You know, if you tell all 5 NA players, it's never happening. Like, you're not having any of the, like, think about every result NA has ever had, like top 4 at Worlds. That wouldn't have happened without like Jensen, etc., and a bunch of players. Then if you go, what about CLG at that MSI? Like, what do you want? Can't do it, can we? So in this scenario, what I want is this. I want a world in which you have either unlimited imports, because I just don't give a fuck about regions. That's what the best teams. So I know that any people could buy more players and get it off. Or you do what it is now. The 2 out of 5 is a very, very good compromise. 3 is too much. 2 is good because it means if the region isn't that good, it doesn't matter even if you got Knight and Ruler, you won't really win worlds off it. But as you say, if you make it 3, all you do is punish LCK and LEC. You just make the regions that oftentimes run 5 from the same. They just get an unfair disadvantage for being too good domestically. That's what are you incentivizing at that point? It's like you say, Monty, at that point, it would be the ultimate fucking heel turn from Riot Global, because it would suggest, wait a minute, I thought you were Riot Global. Who's under that mask? It was NA all along. No, what's that? We're supposed to believe this really is Riot Global. It's global. So I just think 2 is the best compromise. It's the fairest one.
Yeah, and look, it doesn't even make business sense. Like I said, like there's no guarantee that removing this rule would increase viewership in North America, but it almost certainly would have an effect on Europe and Korea. And I don't think it's possible to get bigger viewership in China by adding more Korean players to the league. It's already huge in China, right? So it would really just be very detrimental to see the star players out of Europe and Korea potentially go to North America. And the viewership is in such a decline in North America anyway that I don't think it would revive it substantially. There are so many systemic issues for North America.
I've got 2 other angles that make no sense about right this moment doing it. One, LCS is downgrading salaries. They don't have the money. You're going to open them up and dare them to double down and buy 3 imports. Then secondly, I'll tell you why LCK would lose their shit if you make a 3rd import. Guys, they now have to start losing money on millions and millions paying. If you make it so that there's more competition for a 3rd player that can go to LCS, LPL, now that means the Korean teams, for no reason, Monty, just have to pay even more competitive salaries to that extra person who would have gone to that region. Like, you actually just, the joke is to prop up NA even more, you would just be taxing other regions as well. So monetarily, it doesn't make sense. Like, you have to pay a lot to get these players.
Yeah, I think it's the best thing that can happen is that NA needs to be bootstrapped by its own talent in order to find that competitive success at this point in time. That's the thing that will actually change the future of North American League of Legends. I've started getting into British comedy recently, really been enjoying John Richardson and Joe Wilkinson, among others. Do you guys have any recommendations in regards to shows or comedians to check out? Stand-up's definitely not more Thorin's thing than mine. So
here's the thing. I'm not a huge British stand-up fan, actually, for the Americans, but I know loads of shows. There's loads of niche shows. So there's like, very famous one is The Mighty Boosh. That's one that combines like music and comedy. And one thing that's mad underrated is the guy who writes all the songs, who is like the Julian whatever guy, he is fucking amazing at writing like a song that sounds like a real song, isn't he? He's unbelievable.
Yeah. He's also the guy, if you guys have seen, so I know him from The Mighty Boosh, but I think we might be talking about different guys, but one of the guys from The Mighty Boosh is the host of the Great British Bake Off.
Probably not the same guy then.
That's the other guy. Sorry, that's Noel. But yeah, really fun show. Yeah, Noel Fielding. But yeah, if you guys have seen Great British Bake Off, he did a like kind of sketch comedy show called The Mighty Boosh. That was very funny back in the day. Especially
there's loads from British TV because we had loads of like series. So what I always say is like an underground one called Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, where it's a show that's like a meta mockumentary spoof version of like 80s horror where a guy like works he's like a cool guy and he works in like a fucking hospital and there's all these like Lovecraftian things coming through. That's really funny. If you like that, some of the people in that did a show called Snuffbox, which is very out there sort of comedy. Then there's obviously like Peep Show's a great one, I always say, because it's the one where everything's from the POV of the person, so you can hear their thoughts, and then it swaps to the other person and you hear what they're thinking. So it's all about like the awkwardness of social interactions and stuff like that. There's some really old school ones. If you like sci-fi, there's one called Red Dwarf, where the premise is like the last man ever in humanity wakes up on like a ship like thousands of years in the future where he's been like hypersleep, and all he has as he goes around this empty universe, this comedy show, is like a fucking android, like a fucking hologram of not even his friend Monty. He gets a hologram, one hologram of the shittest guy on the whole ship that he hated and was an arsehole, and the whole thing's just a comedy show, and his cat, while he was in hypersleep, has evolved and it's semi-human and can talk and stuff and has a personality like almost like Prince or something. So that's just a really out there one. There's a whole bunch of them. For British ones, there's loads, because there's loads of like short series that aren't like super duper insanely long.
And like low budget stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff that's all
Small
based
theater
on
of the mind.
good writing and like weird concepts. Yeah, I like some of those. Mighty Boosh is extremely low budget as a show.
Yeah,
the fun of it just comes from the imagination and like
my favorite Mighty Boosh episode is that one
comedy
where they go on the desert island and they go mad from drinking seawater and they start imagining that these coconuts are actually their girlfriends, and they start getting like domestic problems with them and have like it's hilarious. You just got to watch it. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's very surrealistic comedy, guys. That's very, very weird.
That's a good little list for you.
I really like that show. Is Fudge the most overrated Western player over the last few years? I mean, not domestic.
He's on the list, maybe.
He has had very good domestic performances. And he had his first international performance at MSI was quite good. It's just he's been a little bit rocky in international performances over the last couple of years.
My problem is, even domestically, it's because he's on the best team. Am I missing something? Like, it's not like he smashes the LCS. Like, bro, when Alfari was there, Alfari was better than him on like a flawed Team Liquid. Like, here's the thing. I mean, if you actually put Fudge in context, he comes from the Oceanic region. He is not someone who's from NA. He's like JKS almost in CSGO. He's not supposed to be like simple. He just has to, if he's very good and he can play at the level of the top Europeans, that's legit. So I think he's good, but I do think people do always make it sound like he's like, they make it sound like he's like fucking like smurfing top lane every split and he's unbeatable. It's like, he isn't really. He's just an above average good player.
Consider this.
And they like his personality, so I understand they hype him for that.
When he swapped off of his role, top lane, the player that replaced him won MVP. Think about that. think about that. When he's been in top lane, who's been winning MVP? It's Blabber on his team. It's always somebody else on his team, guys.
Now it's Berserker. Exactly. It's never him. He's a passenger.
So it's like how many times do other players on his team, and I don't think these were not deserved MVPs.
They were deserved. Mate, Charles Barkley has the line, because he tries to do this to divide up the modern stars where they make the super teams money. He says it only counts if you're the bus driver. You can't be a passenger on the bus. You got to be the bus driver. If you want to be like Michael Jordan, you got to be the bus driver.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's like super overrated, but there are certainly things going against.
Who would be the candidate if not? If we're doing a Western player, who's mega? Like, I do think Broken Blade's a bit overrated. He's in the same category. Who else?
Bjergsen, clearly.
Oh, last few years, definitely. Dude, they still. The joke is he actually had to retire before they'd ever given up that maybe he wasn't good anymore. They're still selling that line now.
Look, man, I think
that's got to be.
I think Bjergsen's like a hard candidate for that. How likely is the world's change to a Swiss system because Riot is terrified of what would happen when no Western teams make it out of groups? Pretty good. Look,
by the way, the saddest thing is, and if you watch the CSGO major, you know this, the Swiss system has absolutely increased the chances Western teams get into the playoffs. Absolutely. Because not only you can have random draws where they just play each other.
Yep.
You can do it.
You could theoretically just like only play Western teams and get into
it. Can happen. Like all you need is like one right upset and it just happens like that. Yeah. And the seeding's going to be a nightmare. All sorts of shit can happen, mate. Yeah.
It's going to be terrible. It's going to be absolutely terrible. But yes.
So I can believe that cynically.
Riot literally loves variance in tournaments. A guy who is in the upper echelons of Riot esports to this day once told me when I asked, why do you have best of threes at quarterfinals at Worlds? Because remember, that used to be a thing. Literally told me it's because it increases the chances of an upset. That is their mentality. So that person still works there, still has a lot of control over these factors. So when you ask, what is the chance that they want upsets? The answer is quite a bit. And remember, the people who are making these decisions about formats are in the Los Angeles office. They're not the Korean and Chinese league, like esports people who are making format decisions. So there is an insane bias to propping up the West within Riot's the people who actually make the format decisions.
By the way, low key, it's good job I just don't speak Chinese and have no connections really beyond like knowing about match fixing and stuff in the Chinese scene. Because here's the thing, if I could ever somehow, you know that saying like from God's lips to our ears, or if it was from Thorin's lips to Tencent's ears, this was what I, as the grimmer Wormtongue, would whisper into their ear. Make Chinese or Korean people have the Riot Global. Take it from NA. Take it from them. Because I would just love to see, they would just run real shit, mate. They'd run real tournament. They wouldn't have to give a fuck about LCS and NA. Basically, if you're not good, tough luck, get good, motherfucker. Like, we did it. Exactly. We played a million hours, like, in a fucked up way. Since Riot's not really that great anyway, I'd almost rather, like, the Chinese who would just pump up viewership. LCK would just make it the hardest tournament. I'd almost love they took over. I'm an elitist.
Oh, absolutely. Since the Talisman got sold to NA, the West has won a total of 3 games in the knockout stages in international tournaments. I assume the Talisman is perks.
Oh, right. Okay.
The West has won 3 games in the knockout stages of international tournaments. 2 from Mad Lions versus Damwon, 1 from G2 versus Gen.G, 09 in Worlds. What happened? Here's the thing, guys. When we talk about the West being competitive with Asian regions, there's kind of the way you have to think about it is not the West. Okay. It was either the West when the Korean and Chinese people didn't have a server. Okay. They didn't have a server to play on. Like literally Korean players were playing 2 NA with ping, 150 ping. So it wasn't really, and it was very early on in their scenes. By the time that those regions got servers, they were the best teams in the world. And it was not the West, guys. It was a couple of Western teams. It was Moscow 5 and it was G2. Those were they were unique teams, and it wasn't about the West. It was that it was a very good group of players who hit a certain style that were able to overcome regional disparities.
Dude, what shows it wasn't the region, especially the Moscow 5 one is, I know obviously eventually they just actually made it its own league, the Russian league or whatever. Like they've never had anything after that. It was that one team ever with all the fucking Russian players and Edward from Armenia or whatever. And then that was it. Like, there's never been another great Russian team. Like, the ANX team was just a fluke team, weren't they? Like, that just shows, the problem I think in esports in general, mate, is people don't know the difference between the outlier and the pattern. And people always take the outlier and say it's indicative of the pattern, when sometimes the outlier is the exception that proves the rule. So it's why I always say you can never get rid of, like, Faker. The next guy can never be Faker. He can't have the same career, the same story. There's too much to build up. Even if he's better, like Trophy's better than Faker right now, but he isn't Faker though, is he? For what it means to the game. And so, the whole Western angle's overblown. Essentially, it's just every couple of years you get one team that has a chance.
Yeah, and the Fnatic team too that made the World Finals, I think, was substantially worse than both the G2 that won MSI and made a World Finals, as well as the Moscow 5 that was literally winning international tournaments against Korean teams. Granted, that was in the early days of Korea, but Moscow 5 also came into the Season 2 World Finals as the favorite to win that event. So I don't know. I really think that it's not a Western thing. It really is just the right mixture of European players that have done well.
By the way, that is also the other thing. You know, when people always ask one of those questions, if you could change one thing, I know what it is now. I want to pop out of a time machine before game 3 in the Moscow 5 versus TPA and go, look, Diamond Prox, you don't know me, I'm from the future. Ban Italy. Just trust me. And they'll say something Russian that, like, he'd know what it meant, like, some fucking phrase that trigger him. Like, and they go, oh, okay. And then they ban Italy, and mate, I don't even say they'll win. Please give me that best of 5 of Frost against Moscow 5. Please. I just want that so badly. I want to see what happens in that match. I just need to know what happens in that match. Because they were both also really good team
we
fighting.
Were robbed because of stupid single elimination over the years. All the matches we were robbed of. Is there a story behind the Western style music played at the beginning of LFN shows? No, it's just something there. It seems appropriate. So some of the Wild West, like Ennio Morricone inspired music, just something fun to listen to. What do you think about Nicolo Loren's retirement? Will this significantly affect Riot's priorities? By the way, guys, I fucking love this about Riot. So Did they hire an external candidate? Of course not. Of course they didn't. They hired another guy who's been there since 2010. Remember, this is the company that didn't fire anybody as a result of their gross misconduct against women within their own company that cost them $100 million lawsuit with the state of California. Now, this would have been a perfect time to say, hey, we need to get some fresh blood in here to change the direction of the company. If we're not going to fire somebody, maybe we bring in an entirely new CEO from the outside. Nope. Same guy who's been there.
Also
same
gives
guy
you plausible deniability, bro. If the new guy can always say, I wasn't here for that. Perfect.
Same guy who was there for the entire bullshit that happened. The entire bullshit. And of course, because it's never an external candidate. It's the same thing that John Needham said about the another commissioner for the LCS. They did hire an external commissioner. She already left the job. Now, are we going to hire an external one? No, John Needham says, we have the best candidates right here at Riot. Objectively untrue. This is just factual, guys, from the people available in the industry. I am the best candidate for LCS commissioner. Okay, let's go over why. Literally know all of the talent at the LCS. I've worked with them for years. Know the entire history of the LCS. I was selected by multiple teams within the LCS to be the commissioner of a different league. They picked me to do it because I have good relationships with the teams and I know many of their owners for a long time. When the teams could pick somebody, they picked me. Okay, they didn't pick somebody from Riot to go run Flashpoint. So I already have very good established relationships with the LCS teams. I have been the commissioner before of a league for a number of years. I mean, I've worked in production. I've been in esports longer than anyone at Riot. That's just factual. There's no better candidate for me. It is impossible for them to have a better internal candidate to do the job of commissioner than me. So we can just say that that's a lie on its face. And it's a lie on its face, probably, that there was not a better CEO candidate that Riot could have hired. So I'm tired of them just hiring internal people and pretending that they're the best. I would have liked to have seen somebody come in from the outside.
Maybe this might appear in the Thorin versus Reddit, which I'm going to bring back. But all I'll say is this. That entire thread on Reddit was one of the most I want like 5 minutes of my time back of my life. Because it was people who don't know what any of these people did within Riot, just speculating. And they had no basis. It was just completely talking out your ass. Like on the one hand, like the Nicolo guy apparently did everything great. And then the other guy coming in, well, maybe you should have hired him. Who the fuck knows? Riot is so monolithic. I just treat them as a monolithic entity.
Yeah. And look, I think Nicolo Loren's retirement, he's very French. He wants to go back to France and spend time with his family. Good on him. Like, cool. I don't think he was a terrible CEO. I don't really know what he did because Riot is so opaque when it comes to this leadership stuff. I do know that he didn't fire anybody when the scandal happened, which I think is ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous that he couldn't find anybody responsible for that shit. That's absurd. If Elephant had the resources, bandwidth, etc., to cover another game, which one would it be and why? Well, you're probably going to find out about this, relatively soon. But obviously, we want to cover other major esports. So, like Valorant would be a main one because that's probably the next biggest game that we don't cover.
Technically, he did say, though, like, if budget wasn't an issue, then I'm tomorrow announcing the StarCraft Brood War division and Quake 3 Quake Live division. And all we're going to do is do enormous documentaries about, like, great champions of old, get the best edited things together, have round tables. Yeah, I'll be doing that tomorrow. Look, also, not going to be great for the Zoomers.
We'd probably start our own esports Hall of Fame with blackjack and hookers. Like, I would love to be able to get a studio and invite a bunch of people in to do interviews and like start a real like esports Hall of Fame where we can do documentary style content and interviews with some of the greats and tell their stories and enshrine them within esports history.
Shall I hype you for why the esports? Because you're going to think, guys, but there's a million esports Hall of Fames. It's always the same names. Not in my esports Hall of Fame. So I'm going to drop 2 for you right now just to give you a little taste. I'm not going on media hype. I'm not going on a few of the most famous players. So, for example, I would make sure every great player who was the GOATs all got into my Hall of Fame, but I would change the order. So, first ballot Hall of Fame goes like this every time, Monty. It goes Boxer from StarCraft, Hayton from Counter-Strike, and then either Thresh or Fatality from Quake, right? No. They're all getting in, but first goes Potty from Counter-Strike, goes Nada from StarCraft, and then it goes like
Nada
fucking
first is
Cooler
interesting.
from Quake. Then the others come in. But the point is, Potty was greater than Heaton, Nada was greater than Boxer. You've actually got Hall of Fames wrong. You're doing the Media Hall of Fame. You're doing the Media Hall of Fame, guys. So I'm doing the real Hall of Fame. And I also want for my Hall of Fame, I don't want to just give you a trophy or show you on a shit stage. I want to like give you something like a baller ass ring. And it's like that ring is like only the sickest people. There'll never be someone who's a hype one. And you'll only get it if you were a true, like, all-time great. So I want it to be where it's also exclusive. It's not going to be a Hall of Fame where everyone gets in. I like, Monty, that in the NFL Hall of Fame, there's a few where positionally they're stupid, like wide receiver. But I actually like that they don't let, like, they might not let Eli Manning in, and I almost think that's right. But a bomb-ass narrative one to New York City, baby, he'd instantly get in for a media one, wouldn't he? You know, so I actually like it to be exclusive too. Don't let too many people in. Make it have to be goated to get in.
I also think it'd be fun to be able to make custom awards. Like you talk about a ring, but what if you made a different award for every single player that was contextual to their career? Right.
Maybe like based on their game or something. Maybe you get like a quad damage if you're a Quake player, or the fucking you get like
but like something about their style, even potentially, right? You know, something that really was totally unique to the reason why they were there would be interesting.
Okay.
You could do a variety of crazy things.
Could have like a drop ship for Boxer and stuff like that.
Exactly. Like the tank drops, you know, the tank drops, very famous for Boxer, right? Yeah, something like that. We were promised the best international tournament format. We got 4 final rematches. What happened? Shit happens, guys. By the way,
holy shit, it's our real take. Someone's complaining about the format. I can't handle this, mate. We can't control reality. Is it? I
wish I could.
You know what? I can't even conceive of that question. I can't conceive of complaining about this format.
All I have to say about this is just wait. All we have to do is this next week is going to show you why it's good. What happened before doesn't matter.
Right. Let me just make a quick point to you, right? I'm just going to pull up Gamepedia, as I know I'm right, but I'm just going to double check, right? So are you ready, Monty? If Golden Guardians beat BLG, different bracket. If fucking like G2 lost, different bracket. You're actually complaining about just the results of the tournament causing a bracket you don't like. I'll say it one last time. You are not Vince McMahon. You can only let the results make the results. Right now, explain this to me, Monty. What format, possibly without being rigged, makes it so there's no rematches of the finals? Can you explain one? I can't think of one.
Also, if there was one upset in the quarterfinals,
it's also different.
Entirely different. The fact is that people, like we said in the last episode, are complaining because the West, because they're mad because bad. Okay,
because they're going to lose and have to meet in the low bracket.
I can't fix the fact that all of the quarterfinals were stomps. The reason this is happening, guys, is because these are not the 8 best teams in the world. They're not. They're like 4 of the best teams in the world, and then there's like some scattering of teams that are probably,
I'll show you,
15th to 25th best team in the world. You know what I mean? Or 10th to 25th best team in the world. The problem is that the teams that are attending this tournament are not the best teams in the world. So you're going to get one-sided results, which is then going to result in, at some point in time, most likely some rematches of things you've already seen. But I'm not even disappointed by it. I wasn't disappointed by T1 versus Gen.G, seeing it for a 3rd time in the last 2 months.
You're complaining, guys, about there being not enough international tournaments. If you had 5 of these in a year, you'd get all the matchups you want. Secondly, I'll give you 2 results. And again, Riot can't control who wins the games. If G2 did beat Gen.G, then we would probably get now G2 against some other team, Cloud9 in the low bracket. If Cloud9 beat BLG and G2 lost, this would now be Cloud9 against G2 in the low bracket. You can't help the fact that the bad team just loses. What you're complaining about is the upset never happens. By the way, spoiler, you come to the wrong saloon. I don't want any upsets ever in the history of any esports game. I am a robot. That's who I am. That's who I am, mate.
Do you have a go-to food/guilty pleasure that you enjoyed despite it being cheap and of low quality? An example would be craft dinner. Of course.
Loads. I come from a poor background, mate. I have them all. I've always say my biggest problem with candies and drinks is I actually drink the ones that are definitely the worst for you, that have like stuff. I drink shit that's blue, Monty, and doesn't have any fruit ever touched it. It's just a chemical. It's like a chemical dream in the 1980s of what bubblegum might taste like in a cheap drink, but made as cheaply as possible for 1 cent and then sold for 40 pence because it was the cheap drink I used to buy. Right. The obvious one for me Vietnamese like kebab or something, you know. It's just absolute
kebab's
dog
great.
shit. It's dog shit to eat. It's definitely really bad for you, but it's just my go-to, innit?
I mean, I love tons of this shit, man. Like, as you guys probably know, I love cooking, and I do almost all my cooking from scratch. But that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy also processed foods. I will say I don't have much of a sweet tooth, so the whole like soda, sweet drinks, candy thing doesn't really. I don't really gravitate towards that. But I mean, gross shit like Hot Pockets, like certain kinds of fast food. You know, I I love certain things from Taco Bell, like the Crunchwrap Supreme, which doesn't resemble any kind of real food and doesn't even resemble Mexican food, but it is just fucking delicious. I don't know. Certain fast foods like Chick-fil-A is great. I like Wendy's a lot, but I mean, a lot of different kinds of fast foods are good. They're engineered to be good, guys. They are engineered so that you will like them. So I don't have a problem with it. As long as you just don't eat it all the time, like in moderation, anything is fine, right? So yeah, tons, I would say. You both previously framed player value through the lens of, if I was making a team from scratch, X is the player I'd draft first. If you had to apply the same view to a broadcast, who would be your first draft pick to build a show around from the global talent pool?
First draft pick. Well, if it's League of Legends, I would. Here's the thing: everyone would probably take K-Drum. I would actually take LS, mate. LS or Dom, I actually think you can just do so much with them that if you put, especially because the people we have, mate. I'll just say it right now. This is the one downside of my career is when LS got too big. He actually is a bit too big to do a show with me now. But I'll say it right now. Just look at Dom. Just look at Veteran. I think I would bring the best out of LS, but it just hasn't happened. So LS would be one for me. K-Drill's a pretty good one too.
Yeah, K-Drill's good. If you had to go for like a play-by-play caster, I think you probably go Atlas or Captain Flowers.
Atlas is hella underrated, mate.
Atlas is great.
Does he have a flaw? I've never seen it. He's funny. He's really good at play-by-play. He did the LPL for years. He's done the LCK for years. He himself isn't from those countries. He's from Australia, so he's even like sort of grateful to have a gig. Everything. He's got everything. He's a fucking amazing professional, I think.
Well, he also, as I've said previously, is probably the most experienced caster in the world in League of Legends right now, because he's just been in China and Korea doing 1 billion games a year. Right. Even though he's not as OG as some other people, because he does so many games out of LPL and LCK. You know, the LCS casters only are doing like 2 days a week of games. Like Atlas has been doing 3 to 5 days a week for years and years and years. Atlas has now been in Korea longer than I was in Korea. So, I mean, he literally probably just has the most reps in terms of sheer number of games compared to any other caster in the world. In English. Obviously, in Korean, there are some that have been on the broadcast for longer. Are there any good fan chants in esports? Not that I'm aware of. Are you aware of any? Not compared.
Really.
I mean, not compared to like, you know, Premier League chants.
It's probably the
like,
most famous one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know any. Like, do you know of any Premier League chants that you like?
I mean, there's loads, but the problem is most of them are like offensive, you know. And put it this way, one thing they're quite clever with in the Premier League is they'll do like chants that are for like legendary players, you know. So it'll be like a little, it's almost like a nursery rhyme, you know. You're walking along singing. They'll have like some fucking angle on something. So they're really good with that. That's why one of the reasons, by the way, I don't have a problem with fans or chanting, but it's just shouting TSM is just so brain dead, though, isn't it? Especially when they're not there. Like,
there's nothing clever about it. It's
just shit in it.
Suppose several devs working on a particular project decide to leave a major game company and start their own because they don't want the game to be pay to win and loaded with microtransactions. If afterwards the multi-billion-dollar company sues the indie one for trade secret violations, who do you think has the moral upper hand? Oh, okay. I see. So if several devs are leaving a project because they don't want pay to win, and the multi-billion-dollar sues the company for trade secret violations, who do you think has the moral upper hand? I mean, I don't think you can own people's lives. So definitely the devs who left. Like, the whole point of living is that you get experiences that you carry with you to your future endeavors. So I'm not really about that kind of protectionism based around trade secrets.
I hate non-compete clauses, put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think there's a moral high ground to stand on if you're the company. It's like, if you wanted to keep these people, then you probably should have listened to them about the business model, or, you know, paid them more. Who knows? Where does Mad Life rank all time for supports? I think this is a really interesting question as League of Legends goes on, because Mad Life's peak was so high, but his longevity really wasn't that great, right? There was a time like basically after season 2 Worlds and then pre-Faker where Mad Life probably was the greatest player in the world, but his peak, and he was still a great support after that, but Faker was clearly the best player after his debut. And so I don't really, he's probably lower than players like Mata or even Keria right now. There's probably some Chinese supports that, you know, you'd place really high up there as well. I don't think he's that high. He's probably still top 10. Do you think he'd be top 5?
I'd probably still put him top 5, because here's the thing about the longevity angle. His fucking influence on the game was absurd. Like what he did for the role.
That's true.
Even his mechanical ability at the time was like, everyone's going to go its worst, but relative to the time, it was bonkers. Like famously, people used to say that he was one of those people who could like 1v1 his mid laner and beat them mechanically. Like he's like a Mickey X, if you know what I mean. So I do think he should be very high up. Like in my opinion, it's only the likes of the fucking Mata, Keria. These are the people who are his peers. And yes, they have the longevity
like
over him and the championships. Yeah, exactly. There's a Ming. So the problem is there have been a lot of great support players, and it's probably the most nuanced role, but he's probably borderline top 5. He's definitely top 10. He's definitely top 10.
Yeah. I agree. His influence is really like way up there. It's the same conversation that you might have with Dan.
One of the most exciting players I've ever seen in my whole career as well.
Yeah. But I mean, when he was popping off, he was just absolutely game changing on picks like Thresh and Blitzcrank, just amazing at the time. Would you agree with the notion that mid lane in EU has declined recently, or are expectations extremely skewed because of the peak of caps and perks? I mean, mid lane in EU has traditionally been a very competitive role internationally. Players like Humanoid have stood up very well internationally. And I mean, that legacy goes all the way back to Alexich and Froggen, who are very good international players out of the mid lane. So I agree that the mid lane in EU has been pretty bad recently, but I think that's
they're all on their own teams as well. Like Larsen's Koi, they just don't give him a chance to win, mate. I thought he was the best mid laner of this split, but he didn't have a chance to win. The rest of his team capped him. I also think you picked the worst time ever to ask. In my opinion, the reason why Nook almost did become a champion is because mid lane right now isn't like hard carry position. Like everyone plays through ADC anyway. And then secondly, half the picks are supportive right now. Like even Caps isn't picking carry champions.
It's like Nautilus and Sejuani.
Yeah, so I think it's one of the few eras ever where mid lane isn't the daddy position even in EU. Even in EU, it was ADCs. If you look at the ADC of each team, Monty, you will know where each team finished. Crowley was the best, almost won. Fucking Kazi sort of got it together. That was a bit of a fluke. But you go look, Upset's one of the best. He was 3rd. Fucking Hansama's pretty good. He was 4th. Fucking Corbe is pretty good. He was 56th. What do you want? It's almost a ranking of the players except for Kazi. Like that was the position where historically ADC is not the position in EU. So I think you've also just picked the time period where they probably are the weakest in terms of even game influence.
Yeah, but there haven't been, I think, a lot of standouts. I mean, unfortunately, like Humanoid was never able to really pick up the domestic, like, you know, take the baton domestically. Because as soon as he got onto a good team, like VTO was winning MVP and then kind of had a collapse. So it seemed like there wasn't like the next generation of mid laners who were able to put out consistently good performances once they upgraded their teams, if that makes sense. So I think that's been an issue as well.
The problem is essentially, yeah, again, it's also about the team you have around them. Like Humanoid did look at one point like he was the next Caps. For real. Like there was even his feel for the game was very special. Larsen, quite frankly, I do think it's amazing. He just has the Chovy style of play. It's just a different, but that style of play, by the way, isn't 1v9. It's not like that. You have to have the team around you. So, and then the other one is obviously, like you say, Vethio. Like it just turns out, and I have investigated this a lot. I'll probably do some content soon. Essentially, the reason why I think the move to Heretics to go with Jankos is fucking brilliant and have Peter Dunn as your coach is because from asking around some of the past teams, it does sound like the problem with him is he has to be managed as well. It's like if you put all your resources into, you protect him, you give him the picks, you give him the jungle help, you have the support room, then he will carry the game. But he isn't the guy who just starts with nothing and carries the game. Like he's not just a pure. He's very young. People forget. I think he's only played like 2.5 years. He's pretty young as well. People don't realize. So it's like you say, Monty. You don't. This is why I'll say it again. You don't get caps and perks every couple of years. You get them like 1 or 2 every 10 years. Like you're saying, if you go and find the greatest players ever, you don't actually need to go past about 5-6 names in EU. The rest were just good mid laners or above average mid laners.
When LS did an apology video for T1, many weren't able to judge the situation as homophobic. What tools should we be equipped with to be able to evaluate the context of a situation accurately so it doesn't happen again or less often? I think the issue with that is that people were willing to take the statements from the parties involved at face value rather than looking at the context of Korea being still quite a homophobic country, which I can just tell you from living there and, knowing people who like knowing gay people there. It's not easy. Like
it's not really, here's the thing though, it's not like super overt though, right?
Yeah, no, it's all hidden, right? The thing about Korean society is that they don't want to talk about it. They want to just sweep it under the rug and pretend that it doesn't exist. And it's not that they're actively attacking it. It's that the easiest thing in Korean culture is just to pretend that the bad things aren't happening, and deny that they even exist. And I have gay friends who in Korea, beyond LS, and it's hard. I can just tell you, it's really hard on them over there. And the way that, they feel that they can't really be openly gay, even just like mildly, that they have to kind of stay closeted, except in very specific environments. It's not easy. And so I think you have to know that context, which is that it's very different to be a gay person and the way you have to present yourself publicly in Korea than it is in Western culture. Certainly like celebrities can't be gay, even though I think if you look at some Korean celebrities, you probably think that some of them might be gay. Yeah. Just saying, like some of those K-pop stars, I find, I think most people know that some of them are probably gay. So I think that you have to listen to people outside of it. And I think you can't just say like, well, LS, you have to consider their motivations. And LS, doesn't want to, reasonably, I think, didn't want to be attacked in that situation. And probably wanted it to end. And also he had an established relationship with T1. Remember that he kept on being a streamer for T1 afterwards. So he wasn't going to go on the warpath and burn the bridge. And T1 didn't want to anger a bunch of their Korean fans and call them out, which has been, as we discussed earlier in this episode, a pattern of behavior for T1, which is just enabling the shitty parts of their fan base. And that's kind of a bummer. So I would say, the best thing to do is to listen to the people like us. And I think this is the importance of Last Free Nation, guys, is that we don't have relationships with the developers, right? We don't have any, like the outcome of this is totally what we think ethically should be done and isn't predicated on what will Riot think or what will T1 think or what will any of these people think. Like we don't care. And so that is why we are important to this esports ecosystem, because we're like literally like the last free nation within this industry now that can actually talk about these issues. So I would say you don't have to take what we say at face value, but I think that you probably, before forming an opinion, should listen to what we have to say about it, because we are not beholden to anybody, unlike all of the parties within that particular situation.
I'm not going to reveal loads of secret info, but I'll give you a taste. So first of all, what I'll say is this. One, LS quite literally, essentially his visa status in Korea could have been threatened by that fucking situation. If you understand the connections giant orgs have to the government, to Kesper, it is not a place you fuck around. That is a country you will... Here's a little point. I'll just make it very, very subtle here, that you guys in the West won't understand because it goes against your programming. You can move to Korea. You can have children in Korea. You can even have unless you had a half Korean child, and even then socially, you will never be Korean. They will never consider you Korean. You will always be a guest, and you are expected to behave like a guest. You are expected to know what you know, and sometimes you're allowed to get away with not knowing what you don't know if they think it's an honest mistake. But you cannot go against their traditions, you cannot speak against them, and you definitely cannot bring what appears to be, in their mind, Western bullshit into the equation. So absolutely, if you start causing a big stink, they will find a way to ship your ass the fuck out of Korea. You wouldn't be the first person to have it done to you, put it that way. I won't go into other details in esports. Then, as you said, Monty, you cannot take a video like that. By definition, at face value, there is insane conflict of interest. There is insane external pressures placed upon the people making those statements. And so all I'll say is this: think if we treated the Danny situation. In fact, you know what, Monty? A few little shitheads in the industry did do this, but they're not on my level or my radar, so I didn't call them out. There were people where after Danny did that tweet saying it was all fine, and EG was saying like, well, there we go, Thorin and Richard Lewis blown the fuck out. We must accept what he says. What came out after that, those bruh? What came out after that? How did that work out? Oh, the joke is, I even said the same thing. Eventually, at the end, because of my moral code, I actually turned against Danny and his family because they became complicit. They lied and they helped maintain a scenario where the next Danny can get fucked over. But apparently, if he gets paid off like some sinister fucking massive big company type scenario, that's just supposed to be cool. It ain't cool with me. And the last thing I'll say is this: the reason why this wasn't about fans wanting Danny, the guy from fucking Damwon, to be the coach and just thinking Ellis was an inappropriate coach. By the way, a legitimate take. My take, for fuck's sake. The reason I knew he'd never last, spoiler, he didn't even in Cloud9, for fuck's sake. What systems do you think T1 have, bro? You can't go against that and turn up late. So anyway, the one thing I'll say is this: I heard from internal aspects, T1 isn't just Joe Marsh. They pretend like it is because it's comfortable. It's a whole bunch of Korean people still. And all I heard was some of those Korean people maybe didn't fuck with LS on this angle. And they're exactly the people, by the way, you think they can't back channel to the leader of a fan club and get something out there and maybe say, hey, if you were to, you know, what if you were to like have the trucks come on this deal? Maybe it's time to rally the troops. Like, I got the vibe that the fix was in, and it's why I went so hard. I'll even give you a little bit of one last little bit of juice. You think LS, my friend, who didn't come to me eventually and go like, you know, like, we're going to sort of end it here and it's going to be over and there's no drama. I straight up told him, bro, it's like the Danny one. This isn't just about you. This is about a bigger point here. So I even told him I won't be letting up. Now, look, I only gave him, say, a couple more weeks, but I still gave Joe Marsh and T1 the business after that. So I did that show with Dom because it's just like, fuck this, mate. You cannot get away with it. If I think for real that is your motivation, there's circumstantial evidence to suggest it, then you know what? You want to talk about paying people off? That's the price you pay. You have to have people call you out in public, throw dirt on your name justifiably, and then you have to live with that. Because that's the problem I have with the whole scenario, Monty. Either be honest and just straight up be like, make it vague, we have cultural reasons he's inappropriate, or just say you think he's a bad coach. But if you thought he was a good coach and somehow what he does in closed doors was the reason you can't hire him in your team, fuck that. Fuck that noise, mate. That's not even about what you think about that topic. Fuck that as an employment status.
Yeah, it's also that you just can't trust people within this industry because, again, the developer / tournament organizer control is so complete over this industry at this point in time that, for example, in the Danny situation, all of the people who should have been calling out the obvious bad actors, like, we know it was Nicole LaPointe Jameson and the management that caused that issue. We know it. We know that is true. Look at all the additional reporting that Richard Lewis has been doing on his Substack. Like, we know it's true. And yet, the people within the industry, for some reason, couldn't actually use her name. Oh, it must be a systemic issue. You know what I mean? It's like, yet these same people, literally some of these same people, when Thorin says half jokingly, I am esports, will relentlessly shit all over him because it is safe to do so. And there are a bunch of people, it's like, well, I don't like Thorin, so now's the time for me to shit on him for saying I am esports or pretending he said things that he didn't say. And these people are more outraged by tweets on the internet than real things that people have done that have caused emotional or mental or physical harm to people. And they won't call them out because, again, those teams are partnered and they're cowards. And they don't want it to upset their job. So almost everybody, I would say, in this industry has a very strong ulterior motive. when it comes to criticizing organizations or developers or tournament organizers, and they simply aren't going to do it. So probably not worth really listening to them.
It's why it's so gross that you all had to call Carlos out for the tweet, because you would never call T1 out for the fucking way they treated LS. So you don't give a fuck about that topic. You don't give a fuck.
And like, if you are literally more angry about a tweet, which doesn't cause anybody any harm ever at any point in time, versus real actions in the real fucking world that people do, like, get it together, man, and learn to tell the difference. Not to say that the person asking the question didn't. This is a legit question.
Of course, it's just rhetorical.
Social media is bullshit, man. When did you experience the greatest Schadenfreude as a sports fan? Oh, as a sports fan.
Ooh, sports fan. I mean, listen, I can't lie. The 2 Giants wins over the Patriots.
Those are pretty good.
Because one of the best things about those that's underrated.
The undefeated season one was particularly
the most underrated aspect of them is just look at what the Patriots did on their side of the ball. If Brady's the GOAT, mate, tear him up. Go on. Do like the Eagles game. Drop like fucking 40 or something. That was piss weak. You actually wanted to win those titles barely. You actually deserved to get banged out in those ones. What happened is Eli Manning is not an all-time great quarterback, but he's a fucking gunslinger. He came in and he did exactly what like a Buster Douglas is supposed to do with Mike Tyson. Just knock you the fuck out with some fluky punch. Get lucky. He played that style. That's pretty up there. I've got to say. The problem with the other ones is
especially losing to Eli Manning, and Eli Manning being the Super Bowl MVP is pretty funny.
The other thing is as well, some of my other ones are just incredibly petty. Like when I was a boy, Manchester United won everything and Liverpool was never going to beat them. So at that point, if anyone beat them in a season, I would just magically, oh, great, like Blackburn beat them, fucking Arsenal beat them. I just love that. And then the other one is, in the modern day, it's a similar thing. Manchester City now is like the impossible team to beat in the Premier League and have even robbed my team with like essentially, this is how mad sports is now, Monty. The team that I support, Liverpool, had a season where they scored so many points. They were something like the 2nd or 3rd highest points ever in the Premier League, but they came 2nd that season because Manchester City got more points. So in any other season, you just win and you're one of the greatest ever, but you don't win. So the one thing I have is this. Liverpool has won the Premier League in this era and the Champions League, but Manchester City has never won the Champions League. They might do it this season. We'll see. So essentially, every time they don't and they get knocked out, I enjoy that day because it's like, you know what? You took everything from me, motherfucker. You can get everything taken from you as well. So there you go. As long as we have the Champions League over them, that's all I care about.
I do have to say that over like the last decade as a Broncos fan, also I get great Schadenfreude from the management of the Raiders, which are the Broncos' like greatest rivals, right? Because it's honestly so funny. Like starting with the Khalil Mack trade to the Bears. And then going through what's going on right now, because right now I mean, the John Gruden stuff was also pretty fucking funny. And then now they have Josh McDaniels, who famously was the Broncos coach, who got rid of Jay Cutler and then first round drafted Tim Tebow for the Broncos and basically did an insane job of destroying the Broncos internally. And now he's the Raiders coach and he basically got rid of Derek Carr, which is just such a massive question mark for the entire organization. So it is very satisfying. My Schadenfreude of watching him, after watching him dismantle the Broncos, now be on the Raiders and dismantling the Raiders is very funny and pleasurable. I will say that. That's an ongoing thing that's pretty fun. All right, guys, that's it. So at the end of this show, we will be back on our normal schedule on Tuesdays next week because MSI will be over. We're not going to be trying to flip this between the cracks on off days for MSI. And so you guys can look forward. We'll be back live on Twitch next Tuesday at 6 p.m. CEST, which is going to be 9 a.m., I believe, Pacific time /noon Eastern time if you are in America. We will see you then.